Chapter 24:16. Within the city lord's mansion, Jun Wuya, Dao Xiong, Yin Litian, and the other sovereigns were arguing endlessly. Within the city lord's mansion, Jun Wuya, Dao Xiong, Yin Litian, and the other sovereigns were arguing endlessly. Bullshit. If it weren't for Xiao Chen's sacrifice, how could the current situation have occurred? If we don't save Xiao Chen, wouldn't the cultivators of the Great Thousand World be disappointed? Dao Xiong shouted angrily. Hearing Dao Xiong's words, Yin Litian was unwilling to be outdone. Yes, this king acknowledges Xiao Chen's sacrifice, but with the current situation, if we forcefully save him, what will happen to Leaping Tiger City? Are we going to hand over Leaping Tiger City, which we just obtained, to the evil path? Both sides had their own opinions, and neither side was willing to accept the other. As the two sides argued, Jun Wuya suddenly spoke from the main seat. Everyone, it's useless to continue arguing like this. I wonder if you can listen to this old man? Jun Wuya spoke slowly. Hearing this, everyone's gazes fell on Jun Wuya. Facing everyone's gazes, Jun Wuya said indifferently, "The current situation is very complicated, and it's very difficult for us to save Xiao Chen. However, this old man believes that the best way to save Xiao Chen is to continuously exert pressure on the battlefield. Right now, the evil spirits, Zishi and Qi Mei, are chasing after Xiao Chen. Without the three of them, the evil path's strength on the battlefield is definitely inferior to ours. We can use pressure to force the evil spirits back." Dao Xiong, Luo Xing, and the others' eyes lit up when they heard Jun Wuya's words. They were overjoyed. Yes, this was a good idea. It was unrealistic to directly head to the Heaven Awaken realm to save Xiao Chen. Moreover, the evil path wouldn't let the sovereigns reach the Heaven Awaken realm so easily. Since that was the case, they would do the opposite. They would use pressure on the battlefield to force the evil spirits back. Just think about it, if they couldn't hold on the battlefield, would the evil spirits still have time to chase after Xiao Chen and the others? Obviously, it was impossible. Once they lost on the battlefield, the entire evil path would be in danger. Therefore, if the evil path really couldn't hold on in a head-on battle, Xie Ming and the other two would definitely retreat as soon as possible. At that time, without Xie Ming and the others, Xiao Chen and the others would naturally be safe. Secondly, Jun Wuya's method also guaranteed that Leaping Tiger City would be safe. It could be said that it was the best of both worlds. After hearing Jun Wuya's words, even Yin Litian and Yun Chen had nothing to say. Indeed, this was the best way. Without much hesitation, Dao Xiong was the first to speak. "All right, Brother Wuya's idea is not bad. Next, we'll launch a fierce attack on the corrupt path. I refuse to believe that the three phantasms won't retreat." Dao Xiong agreed. Then, Yin Litian and Yun Chen also nodded in agreement before the crowd's gazes. Increasing the pressure on the evil path, and forcing the evil path to withdraw the three evil spirits was the only thing the sovereigns could do for Xiao Chen and the others. However, the sovereigns' plan still needed time to succeed. In other words, Xiao Chen and the others would have to rely on their own strength to hold on in the Heaven Awaken realm for a few more days. Only then would they be able to hold on until the three evil spirits retreated. However, the sovereigns clearly didn't know about the situation in the Heaven Awaken realm, nor did they know about Xiao Chen and the others' current predicament. In just one day, Xiao Chen and the others had already fallen into a tight encirclement. It would be extremely difficult for them to hold on for a few more days. Xiao Chen naturally didn't know about what the sovereigns were doing. At this moment, Xiao Chen and the others had dealt with the starship in front of them and were driving the spatial spirit boat in a different direction. Xiao Chen's current goal was very simple: to break out of the encirclement. Only by breaking out of the encirclement would they be able to continue dealing with the evil spirit. Once they were completely surrounded, there was nothing they could do. The spatial spirit boat's speed was pushed to the limit. Xiao Chen wanted to break out of the encirclement in one go. Seeing the grim expression on Xiao Chen's face, Everyone knew how tense the situation was. Although the phantasms hadn't made a move yet, if this continued, they would be trapped like turtles in a jar. Third brother, it's not working. We're moving forward, but these bastards are also moving. We're still surrounded. The major forces of the Heaven Awakened realm were completely following the instructions of the evil spirit. They were only surrounding Shao Chun and the others, not attacking. When Shao Chun and the others moved, they also moved to ensure that Shao Chun and the others were always surrounded. Hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Shao Chun calmly said, "It's fine. The spatial spirit boat's speed is much faster than the starships. I believe that it won't be long before we encounter the encirclement." Just as Shao Chun finished speaking, Li Ku, who was on the deck, suddenly shouted, "Sect Master, I see it. I see the starships." Hearing this, Shao Chun and the others immediately went to the deck. Sure enough, from a distance, they could see dozens of starships at the end of their line of sight. Obviously, this was where the encirclement was. Immediately, a cold light flashed in Shao Chun's eyes, and he coldly said, "Don't stop, charge." Since they had already seen the encirclement, the next step was to break out of the encirclement at all costs. They had to break out of the encirclement before the evil spirits arrived. After saying that, Shao Chun jumped off the spatial spirit boat and directly attacked the starships. Seeing this, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, Li Ku, and the others naturally followed closely behind. Only Gu Ling Yao and the other two women remained on the spatial spirit boat. They were responsible for controlling the spatial spirit boat. There were at least tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of cultivators on the dozens of starships. However, Shao Chun and the others didn't have to worry about this at all. None of the cultivators from the Heaven Awakened realm were very strong. So far, the strongest cultivator that Shao Chun and the others had encountered was only at the Immortal Emperor realm. Under Shao Chun's lead, the group quickly tore open a path. The major forces of the Heaven Awakened realm had no way of stopping Shao Chun and the others. It could be said that it was very easy to break out of the encirclement. However, just as Shao Chun and the others broke out of the encirclement, a spatial spirit boat rapidly flew over from afar. Shao Chun, who had just returned to the deck, immediately saw the evil spirits standing on the deck of the spatial spirit boat. He immediately shouted in a deep voice, "Let's go." He didn't expect the evil spirits to arrive so quickly. However, now wasn't the time to be entangled with them. If there was only one evil spirit, Shao Chun naturally wouldn't be afraid. However, there were also two evil spirits, Purple Snake and Chi Mei, beside the evil spirit. Once they were entangled, Shao Chun would only be able to deal with the evil spirit. Purple Snake, Chi Mei, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the others wouldn't be able to stop them. Without any hesitation, the spatial spirit boat's speed instantly increased to the maximum. However, the evil spirit sneered, "Shao Chun, it's already like this. Do you think you can still escape?" Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendations. Chapter 24:17. Although Shao Chun's group had successfully charged out of the encirclement, the evil spirits had also arrived. At this time, Shao Chun chose to escape without any hesitation. Seeing this, the evil spirits naturally quickly chased after him. After finding Shao Chun's location with great difficulty, the evil spirits naturally wouldn't give Shao Chun any chance to escape. Moreover, Xie Tian's side had already sent a message saying that on the main battlefield, the large world side was constantly pressuring them. Without the three evil spirits, it was indeed hard for the evil path to resist. So, he hoped that the evil spirits could quickly take care of Shao Chun's group and return to the main battlefield. The main battlefield was tense, so the evil spirits naturally wouldn't waste any time. So, a cold glow flashed in their eyes, looking like they wouldn't give up until they killed Shao Chun. The two spatial spirit boats flew through the endless starry sky one after the other. Whether it was Shao Chun or the evil spirits, they had already raised the speed of the spatial spirit boats to the limit. flying the entire way, but seeing that they couldn't shake off the evil spirits, Xiao Chen's group became more and more serious. Xian Yuanling even said to Xiao Chen in a small voice, "Third brother, this won't do. We'll definitely be caught." Xian Yuanling could tell that if they didn't come up with a solution soon, Xiao Chen and the others wouldn't be able to shake off the phantasms and the others. If this went on, the phantasms and the others would definitely catch up to them. Hearing Xian Yuanling's words, Xiao Chen slightly knit his brows. He naturally understood this logic, but both sides had spatial spirit boats and the evil spirits were tightly biting onto him. Wanting to shake them off was easier said than done. They both had spatial spirit boats and there wasn't any difference in speed. Like this, how could they shake off the evil spirits? Get someone to stall for time? Of course, this was unrealistic. Although there were only 3 of them, they were all evil exalt. Even if Phantasm hadn't truly broken through to the evil exalt's realm and was only a half-step evil exalt's, his battle prowess was indeed not much different from that of an ordinary evil exalt. With such a lineup, even Xiao Chen would find it hard to delay them. No matter how strong Xiao Chen was or how confident he was, it was impossible for him to face 3 evil sovereigns at the same time. No one could do that. The situation seemed to have fallen into a dangerous situation. Xiao Chen and the others were faced with a dead end. Although the evil spirits had yet to catch up to them, it was only a matter of time before they caught up to them. Once the evil spirits blocked their path, Xiao Chen's group would most likely be doomed. With their current strength, it was simply impossible for them to contend against the power of 3 evil sovereigns. Xiao Chen frowned and kept thinking of a way to deal with the situation. However, in Xiao Chen's opinion, there was no better way now. They couldn't escape and they couldn't beat them. Everything seemed to have fallen into a dead end. The 2 spatial spirit boats were still in the starry sky, moving quickly. They seemed to have forgotten about the time and had no direction to speak of. In the end, even Xiao Chen and the others didn't know where they were. They only wanted to increase their speed. It would be best if they could shake off the evil spirits and the others. However, the evil spirits didn't have the slightest intention of giving up. They were still closely following behind Xiao Chen and the others. Moreover, after such a long chase, the evil spirits and the others seemed to have closed the distance between them. Although this distance didn't seem to be much now, it was obvious that they would catch up in the long run. The evil spirits and the others' spatial spirit boats were faster than Xiao Chen's? This was clearly impossible. The only difference was in the people controlling the spatial spirit boat. On Xiao Chen's side, Xiao Chen was personally controlling the spatial spirit boat. On the other hand, the evil spirit's spatial spirit boat was controlled by Qi Mei, the evil sovereign. As a true evil sovereign, with her controlling the spatial spirit boat, its speed naturally reached its peak. As such, it wasn't difficult to understand why they were faster than Xiao Chen and the others. Just like that, the 2 sides chased and fled, quickly moving through the heaven-awakened realm's starry sky. As the distance between them grew closer and closer, the evil spirits on the deck found an opportunity and pointed a finger. A blood-red finger light shot towards Xiao Chen and the others' spatial spirit boat. The evil spirits wanted to destroy Xiao Chen and the others' spatial spirit boats and completely prevent Xiao Chen and the others from escaping. Facing the evil spirit's attack, Xiao Chen was stunned. He immediately said to Xian Yuanling and Long Qing, "Big brother, second sister, you 2 control the spatial spirit boats." Facing the evil spirit's attack, only Xiao Chen could block it. The others simply didn't have this ability. As such, without any hesitation, Xiao Chen directly handed control of the spatial spirit boats to Long Qing and Xian Yuanling. As for Xiao Chen, he stepped onto the deck and pointed a finger at the evil spirit's blood-red finger light. An azure finger light flashed, and the 2 fiercely collided. Xiao Chen acted in time, narrowly avoiding damage to the spatial spirit boat. However, because Xiao Chen was unable to continue controlling the spatial spirit boats, the spatial spirit boat's speed slowed down. The evil spirits had naturally guessed this. As such, when they saw Xiao Chen act in time and block their attack, not only were the evil spirits not angry at all, but a trace of a smile flashed through their eyes instead. Xiao Chen, do you think you can escape like this? As they spoke, the evil spirits launched another attack. Seeing this, Xiao Chen could only helplessly block it. Subsequently, the evil spirits continued to attack, and Xiao Chen also continued to resist. For a moment, Xiao Chen simply didn't have the chance to control the spatial spirit boat. The evil spirits wanted to delay Xiao Chen and prevent Xiao Chen from controlling the spatial spirit boat. Without Xiao Chen controlling the spatial spirit boats, the spatial spirit boat's speed naturally couldn't be compared to before. As a result, the evil spirits naturally continued to close the distance between them. Little brother, this won't do. They're too fast. If this continues, they'll catch up sooner or later. Long Qing, who was controlling the spatial spirit boats, also discovered that the distance between the two parties was constantly closing. At this moment, he anxiously shouted at Xiao Chen. Hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chen actually already guessed the evil spirit's intention. He knew that the evil spirits were deliberately delaying him and not giving him a chance to control the spatial spirit boat. However, even if he knew this, Xiao Chen couldn't do anything because if Xiao Chen didn't attack, the evil spirits could directly attack the spatial spirit boats. Once the spatial spirit boats were damaged, everything would be over. Therefore, even if he understood everything, Xiao Chen couldn't do anything. Hearing Long Qing's words, Xiao Chen could only block the evil spirit's attacks while shouting in a deep voice, "Don't worry about anything else. Just do your best." In the current situation, Long Qing and the others definitely couldn't do anything. He could only tell them not to think too much and to do their best to escape. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 24:18. With the cultivation base of Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the others, the speed of the spatial spirit boat was naturally slower than that of Qi Mei and Purple Snake, the two evil lords. Furthermore, Xiao Chen did not need to defend against the continuous attacks from the phantasms, so he had no way to control the spatial spirit boat. With the cultivation base of Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the others, the speed of the spatial spirit boat was naturally slower than that of Qi Mei and Purple Snake, the two evil lords. Furthermore, Xiao Chen did not need to defend against the continuous attacks from the phantasms, so he had no way to control the spatial spirit boat. The evil spirits had already made their decision. They would stall Xiao Chen, otherwise he would have time to control the spatial spirit boat. If this continued, with Qi Mei and Purple Snake's cultivations, they would catch up to Xiao Chen's group sooner or later. The distance between the two sides kept closing. Although it wasn't fast, the evil spirits group was indeed closing in on Xiao Chen's group. The two spatial spirit boats kept closing in. If this continued, not long after, the evil spirits group would be able to block the path of Xiao Chen's group. A helpless look flashed in his eyes. With things like this, Xiao Chen indeed had no other choice. After all, no matter how many plans he had, in this kind of situation, it was very hard to use them. To put it bluntly, the difference in strength between the two sides was just too big. If it was just the evil spirits that came this time, it wouldn't matter if Xiao Chen fought with them. But it was a pity that there was also Purple Snake and Qi Mei. Like this, Xiao Chen had no chance of winning at all. Sending out three evil lords at the same time, Xie Tian's meaning from the beginning was very clear. He didn't want to give Xiao Chen any chance to make a comeback. The evil spirits were also very clear on this point, so they didn't give Xiao Chen any chance at all when they made a move. Although the evil spirits admired Xiao Chen very much and sympathized with him, there were some things that they couldn't do anything about. Everyone had their own master, so the evil spirits could only kill him. After all, the evil spirits had already lost the last battle between the righteous and evil. They could not afford to lose again. Therefore, the evil spirits had to kill Shao Chun. There was a trace of pity in his heart, but he didn't show the slightest mercy. His attacks didn't stop at all. In this regard, Shao Chun could only helplessly counterattack. Looking at Shao Chun and the evil spirits continuously attacking each other, Gu Lingyao and the other two girls could not help at all. With their cultivation, they were no match for the evil spirit. They could not even take one hit from him. Their faces were filled with worry, but there was nothing they could do. However, the three girls did not feel much fear. It was like the three girls said before, as long as they could stay by Shao Chen's side, even if they died, the three girls would not be afraid. The three girls knew that this trip would be dangerous from the beginning, but the three of them still chose to follow Shao Chen without any hesitation. So, even if they were in a hopeless situation, the three girls were not afraid at all. Gritting their teeth, the three girls stared at Shao Chen in front of them, not caring about the space spirit ship that came closer and closer. At the same time, Shao Chen seemed to have noticed the gazes of the three girls, and he revealed a helpless smile as he spoke. "It seems like there's nothing we can do this time." When he said this, Shao Chen's face was filled with helplessness and self-deprecation, but there was no fear. Hearing this, Gu Lingyao and the other two revealed faint smiles as they said, "We're not afraid." The four of them looked at each other and saw no trace of fear in each other's eyes. They were not afraid of death. As long as they could stay by each other's side, that was enough. Looking at the three girls' expressions, Shao Chen had mixed feelings. But at this moment, no one knew where they were, but a spatial barrier appeared in front of them. A spatial barrier. This was a place that divided the boundaries of a world. In the past, the Eight Desolates world also had a spatial barrier. But what was strange was that above the spatial barrier of the Heaven Awakened world, there was a huge black hole. It was like the mouth of an abyss that opened its bloody mouth wide, wanting to devour everything. The appearance of the mysterious black hole stunned Li Ku and the others. Then, they shouted anxiously. "Sect Master, you see," upon hearing Li Ku and the others' voices, Shao Chen turned to look. Even with Shao Chen's eyesight, he had never seen a spatial black hole before. This wasn't a spatial channel, but a mysterious black hole. Shao Chen had never seen or come into contact with it before. Instinctively, Shao Chen sensed a strong and dangerous aura from the mysterious black hole. The aura made Shao Chen shudder even though it was not cold. This was a shiver that came from the depths of his soul. It was as though it was constantly telling Shao Chen that this thing was dangerous and that he had to get away from it as soon as possible. Sure enough, as the spatial spirit boat got closer to the mysterious black hole, a huge suction force appeared as though it wanted to suck Shao Chen and the others in. Sensing the appearance of this huge suction force, Long Qing and Xian Yuan Ling, who were controlling the spatial spirit boat, shouted anxiously. "Little brother, this is bad. We have to get here as soon as possible. The suction force is too strong." This suction force wasn't something that Shao Chen and the others could resist with their cultivation. Besides, they had never seen such power before. The spatial spirit boat was on the verge of going out of control. On the other side, the evil spirits also saw the mysterious black hole. Evidently, Xie Ming and the others had long since known about the existence of this mysterious black hole. After all, the Heaven Awakened world had been under the corrupt path's control for a long time. After taking control of the Heaven Awakened world, the corrupt path had discovered this mysterious black hole. Even Xie Tian had personally come to this place to study it. However, the results were disappointing because even Xie Tian couldn't figure out what this mysterious black hole was. It wasn't a spatial channel, so they didn't know where this mysterious black hole led to. Xie Tian even wanted to enter it to test it out, but he was surrounded by danger. Even Xie Tian couldn't figure out the mysteries of this mysterious black hole and even sensed a strong dangerous aura from it. That was why the evil path gave up on this place and no longer approached it. Who would have thought that they would actually end up in the mysterious black hole? A grim look flashed across the phantasm's eyes as he gazed at the mysterious black hole. To humans, the unknown was often the most frightening thing, because they had no idea what kind of dangers were lurking behind it. Slow down. Because they were afraid of the mysterious black hole, the evil spirits had no choice but to speak. Seeing the evil spirits slow down, Xiao Chen's eyes also locked onto the mysterious black hole. After hesitating for a bit, Xiao Chen quickly made a decision. He said to Long Qing and Xian Yuanling, "Charge in." "What?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing and Xian Yuanling coldly said, "Charge in. This is our only chance of survival." Hearing this, Xiao Chen said in a deep voice. Although Xiao Chen also felt the danger of this mysterious black hole, facing the evil spirit's pursuit, Xiao Chen had no other choice. This was their only chance of survival. Even though Xiao Chen didn't know how big this chance was, compared to being caught by the evil spirits, there was definitely a chance of survival. Although this chance of survival was very small and might not even exist, Xiao Chen could only give it a try. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 24:19. Facing the relentless pursuit of the evil spirits, Xiao Chen felt that the mysterious black hole in front of him was their only chance. Facing the relentless pursuit of the evil spirits, Xiao Chen felt that the mysterious black hole in front of him was their only chance. Although it was also hard to say whether they would survive or not, at least there was still a chance. If they stayed and were caught by the evil spirits, they would definitely die. Therefore, Xiao Chen couldn't help but shout at this time. Hearing Xiao Chen's shout, Long Qing and Xian Yuanling were stunned. Then, they both gritted their teeth and immediately stopped controlling the spatial spirit boat, allowing the powerful suction force of the mysterious black hole to suck the spatial spirit boat in. Seeing that Xiao Chen and the others' spatial spirit boat was directly sucked into the mysterious black hole, evil spirit's face darkened. "Are you going to burn your boats? Xiao Chen, do you really think that this will give you a chance of survival?" The evil spirits had no way to stop Xiao Chen and the others. Because of the mysterious black hole, the evil spirits didn't dare to go near it. Therefore, they could only watch as Xiao Chen and the others were sucked into the black hole and disappeared. In the end, they couldn't kill Xiao Chen with their own hands. However, the evil spirits also knew that this was Xiao Chen's gamble. He gambled on the chance that there was a chance in the mysterious black hole. Regarding this, the evil spirits were a little depressed, but there was nothing they could do. At the same time, Purple Snake and Chi Mei also came to the deck. Looking at the mysterious black hole in front of them, the two of them said with a somewhat ugly expression, "What do we do now? Let's go back. Even Father can't see through the mysterious black hole. What can we do? Moreover, Xiao Chen and the others will most likely die after entering the mysterious black hole." Hearing this, the evil spirits said indifferently. The evil spirits didn't expect this outcome. On the other hand, Xiao Chen and the others who were sucked into the mysterious black hole suddenly felt an endless pressure all around them. The pressure not only suppressed everyone's physical bodies, but it also intimidated everyone's souls. They even became dazed, and their eyelids became abnormally heavy. Even Xiao Chen could not resist for long. His vision turned black and he fainted. No one knew what kind of mysterious black hole it was. Xiao Chen and his group could be said to be the only people in the great wide world who had entered the mysterious black hole. However, at this moment, Xiao Chen and the others naturally did not know what was happening in the mysterious black hole. Under the powerful pressure of the black hole, everyone fainted. As for the spatial spirit ship that everyone was riding, at this moment it was like a small boat in the ocean, floating in the huge waves. They didn't know where its destination was, nor did they know where this mysterious black hole would take them. Everything could only depend on God's will. Even Xiao Chen was powerless to change anything at this time. While Xiao Chun and the others rushed into the mysterious black hole, the evil spirits and the others had no choice but to give up. On the main battlefield, according to the discussion of the sovereigns, they were constantly pressuring the evil way. It could be said that the battle could break out at any time. In the face of the constant pressure from the great wide world, the evil way could only fight and retreat in order to wear down the great wide world's edge. Jun Wuya and Tenzu sat facing each other, drinking tea in front of them. At this time, Tenzu sighed softly and said, "It's been 2 days, right?" Hearing Tenzu's words, Jun Wuya nodded slightly. It had indeed been 2 days, but there was still no movement from the evil way's side. The evil spirits and the others also showed no signs of retreating. This made Jun Wuya worried. Facing such great pressure, Xie Tian still didn't want the evil spirits and the others to retreat. It seemed like he was determined to kill Xiao Chen and the others. Thinking of the current situation of Xiao Chen and the others, Jun Wuya couldn't help secretly knitting his brows. However, at this time, Tenzu said something that made Jun Wuya even more shocked. Actually, the Heaven Awakened world is not an ordinary small world. It can be said that it is the gateway to the great wide world. Tenzu slowly drank a mouthful of tea and said in a soft voice, "Gateway?" Upon hearing the heavenly ancestor's words, Jun Wuya seemed to have thought of something all of a sudden. His expression changed drastically. "You mean," Jun Wuya obviously knew some secrets, but this wasn't strange. After all, Jun Wuya's strength was obvious. In the entire great wide world, there were very few things that Jun Wuya didn't know. At the same time, there were also very few things that could make Jun Wuya this shocked. Seeing Jun Wuya's ugly expression, Tenzu shook his head helplessly and said with a bitter smile, "It seems like you also know. In fact, I've been very worried that the Heaven Awakened world has fallen into the hands of the evil way. After all, the Heaven Awakened world is too crucial. But now that Xiao Chun and the others are in the Heaven Awakened world, I'm worried that— You're worried that they will pass through the mysterious black hole?" Upon hearing his words, Jun Wuya interrupted Tenzu before he could finish his sentence. His expression turned incomparably solemn. Jun Wuya and Tenzu both mentioned the mysterious black hole. Besides, they seemed to have guessed whether Xiao Chen and the others would enter the mysterious black hole directly. If that was the case, it would be really dangerous. Jun Wuya didn't know what the mysterious black hole represented because even with his strength, he couldn't detect anything about it. However, with the help of the Heaven Awakened world, Tenzu knew more about the mysterious black hole. That was why Tenzu called it the gateway. Of course, Tenzu didn't tell anyone about this because to Tenzu, it was like a Pandora's box. Once it was opened, the consequences would be unimaginable. Tenzu and Jun Wuya talked about the mysterious black hole at the same time. At the same time, Xiao Chun and the others drifted in the mysterious black hole for an unknown period of time. Finally, they left the mysterious black hole and appeared in an endless starry sky. There was still a huge mysterious black hole in front of Xiao Chun and the others. This should be the other exit of the mysterious black hole. However, Xiao Chun and the others were completely unaware of this because they were all unconscious. Because no one was controlling the spatial spirit ship, it drifted with the waves in the endless heart. No one knew where it would go in the next second. Time seemed to have completely stopped in this endless starry sky. No one knew how much time had passed. 1 day, 2 days, 1 month, 2 months. As time slowly passed, Xiao Chun, who was in a coma, finally opened his eyes slowly. At first, he was a little confused. However, after quickly recovering, Xiao Chun looked at the endless starry sky and sighed in his heart. It seems that it's a success. He was fine. After checking on Gu Lingyao and the other 2 girls, as well as Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, Li Ku, and the others, Xiao Chun found that everyone was fine. They were just in a coma. This made Xiao Chun calm down a little. He had finally escaped a disaster. However, he didn't know where everyone was now. Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 24:20. After escaping death, Shao Chen moved Gu Lingyao, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the others into the cabin. After feeding them ammunition, Shao Chen went to the deck and looked around. After escaping death, Shao Chen moved Gu Lingyao, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the others into the cabin. After feeding them ammunition, Shao Chen went to the deck and looked around. Although it was extremely dangerous, Shao Chen had made the right bet. The mysterious black hole had given them a chance to survive. In Shao Chen's opinion, as long as they were not dead, there was still hope. After all, only by surviving would there be infinite possibilities. However, the most important thing now was to figure out where everyone was now. There was an endless starry sky, and the mysterious black hole had long disappeared. Shao Chen had no direction. After all, Shao Chen did not even know where he was now. Helpless, Shao Chen steered the spatial spirit boat in a direction to avoid it. He planned to find a continent to check out and confirm where he was before making any plans. While Shao Chen steered the spatial spirit boat, 3 days later, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the others woke up one after another. After everyone woke up, they all asked where they were. Regarding this, Shao Chen could only tell them that he did not know. Third brother, did we come to another small thousand world through the spatial black hole? Standing on the deck with Shao Chen, Xianyuan Ling guessed that it had been 3 days, but they still did not see any continent. During these 3 days, Shao Chen had been moving in one direction. No matter what, they should have at least encountered a continent. At the very least, they should have met someone who was also traveling in the starry sky. However, it was a pity that Shao Chen and the others did not even see a shadow in these 3 days. Xianyuan Ling also guessed that they had come to an unknown small thousand world through the mysterious black hole. Hearing Xianyuan Ling's words, Shao Chen did not answer because he was not sure. However, just as the two were talking, Long Qing shouted excitedly in the cabin, "Little brother, Ling Yao and the others have woken up." Gu Lingyao and the other two had the weakest cultivation among everyone, so naturally, they were the last to wake up. Hearing Long Qing's words, Shao Chen was also happy and hurried into the cabin. Seeing that Gu Lingyao and the other two had woken up, Shao Chen was also relieved. He then smiled and asked, "How are you? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" "Husband, don't worry. We're all fine." Hearing this, Gu Lingyao and the other two smiled and said. After personally checking the bodies of Gu Lingyao and the other two, Shao Chen was finally relieved after confirming that they were fine. The 3 of them naturally asked Shao Chen about what had happened. In this regard, Shao Chen could only tell the 3 of them the truth. The mysterious black hole had indeed saved their lives, but now, Shao Chen did not know where they had appeared. Seeing that Shao Chen's face was a little solemn when he talked about the current situation, Tianyu also smiled and comforted him. "Husband, it's already a great fortune to be alive. Anyway, as long as we're alive, there will be a day when we can return to the Great Thousand World." Tianyu comforted him. In this regard, Gu Lingyao and Hong Xiu naturally agreed. Hearing the 3 of them, Shao Chen also smiled and said, "Yes, you're right. We're lucky enough to be alive. As for where we are, there's no need to worry about it." As long as they were alive, there was hope for them to return to the Great Thousand World. After chatting with the 3 of them for a while, Shao Chen returned to the deck again. Although Shao Chen's mood had improved a lot with the awakening of Gu Lingyao and the other two, he still did not dare to let his guard down. This was because everything around him was too unfamiliar, so Shao Chen did not dare to be careless. After traveling for another half a month, a continent finally appeared in front of Shao Chen and the rest. They could not see the end of the continent at a glance. Shao Chen did not hesitate at all and immediately let Xianyuan Ling land on this continent. The most important thing now was to find out where they were. The spatial spirit boat slowly landed in an uninhabited mountain range on this continent. After keeping the spatial spirit boat, Shao Chen and the rest immediately left the mountain range. This time, Xiao Chen and the rest were lucky. As soon as they left the mountain range, they saw a town. Although the area was not big, they finally saw people. As long as they knew where this place was, Xiao Chen and the rest could plan to return to the Great Thousand World. Walking toward the town, Xiao Chen and the rest smoothly entered the city. After all, this was just a Xiao Chen, so the management was naturally very lax. There was also no such thing as an entrance fee. After entering the city, Xiao Chen saw a few soldiers who were in charge of guarding the city gate. Although they were called soldiers, they were actually a few old men. To put it bluntly, they were just old and weak soldiers. Xiao Chen stepped forward and asked politely, "Elders, I'd like to ask where this place is." Upon hearing Xiao Chen's question, the few old men were stunned. Then, they said flatly, "This is the Lin country, Wanshan City." "Why? You don't even know where this place is?" Upon hearing this, the few old men sized up Xiao Chen and the rest suspiciously. Speaking of which, Xiao Chen and the rest looked rather noble, and were dressed in extraordinary clothes. At a glance, one could tell that they were not ordinary people. This was also the reason why the few old men patiently answered Xiao Chen's question. However, after hearing their words, Xiao Chen and the rest were completely stunned. The Lin country, Wanshan City? Where is this place? I've never heard of it. For a moment, Xiao Chen and the rest thought that they must have been transported to a small thousand world. Immediately, Xiao Chen took out a spirit stone and handed it to the few old men. Then, he asked, "Elders, what is the name of this continent that we're heading to? And this world?" The Lin country and Wanshan City were obviously not enough for Xiao Chen to know where this place was. However, in response to Xiao Chen's question, the few old men were stunned. They had never stepped out of the Lin country in their entire lives, so how would they know what this continent was called? There was no world yet, so these few old men had no idea at all. It was like asking an ant what the world was. Would it be able to answer you? However, when they saw the spirit stone that Xiao Chen handed over, they were stunned. Then, they said excitedly, "A spirit stone." Apparently, in the old men's eyes, the spirit stone in Xiao Chen's hand was called a spirit stone. However, while they were shocked, a fat monk in a monk's robe appeared before them. He put his palms together and said solemnly to Xiao Chen, "Benefactor, this poor monk can see the dark aura on your face. I'm afraid that a bloody disaster will befall you in the near future. This poor monk is a monk. Since we're fated to meet, I naturally won't stand idly by. This is a Buddha bead that this poor monk personally consecrate. It will ensure that you survive this calamity. Ba. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 24-21. Xiao Chen and the rest were taken aback by the sudden appearance of the monk. However, they didn't think too much about the monk's solemn expression. On the other hand, Xiao Chen returned the greeting. "Master, thank you for your kind intentions," but, with Xiao Chen's eyesight, it wasn't difficult for him to see that the string of Buddhist beads in the monk's hand was something that could be found anywhere on the streets. As for the consecration mentioned by the monk, Xiao Chen didn't believe in it at all. Xiao Chen wanted to reject the monk, but before Xiao Chen finished his sentence, the monk interrupted. Ba. Benefactor, this poor monk has the intention to help you. I hope you won't reject my offer. You don't even have the right to reject." When the monk said that, there wasn't the slightest change in his expression. He indeed looked like a highly respected senior monk. However, when the monk stopped Xiao Chen and the rest, some of the people around the city gate began to whisper among themselves. "It's that flowery monk again. These outsiders are doomed. I reckon they're going to be blackmailed by him again. That's right. Sigh, which temple did this damned flowery monk come from? He's really repulsive." It was obvious that there were quite a few people who knew this monk in this small myriad mountain city. However, every time the monk was mentioned, everyone's eyes would uncontrollably reveal a trace of hatred. It was obvious that the monk's reputation was not good. Logically speaking, since he was a monk, he shouldn't be hated by so many people. However, the expressions of the people around didn't seem to be fake, especially the hatred in their eyes. However, the monk wasn't bothered at all. He stuffed the Buddhist beads into Xiao Chen's hand and put his palms together. Ba. Benefactor, please accept it. The monk forcefully stuffed the Buddhist beads into Xiao Chen's hand. Regarding this, Xiao Chen was extremely helpless. This was indeed a string of the most ordinary Buddhist beads. What use was there for it? However, Xiao Chen wasn't in the mood to argue with the monk. After casually defeating the Buddha, Xiao Chen prepared to leave. He still needed to find out where he was as soon as possible. However, Xiao Chen wanted to leave. However, Tyrant did not allow him to do so. He took a step forward and blocked the path of Xiao Chen and the others. Seeing this, Xiao Chen frowned. His expression gradually turned cold as he looked at Tyrant. In the face of Xiao Chen's gradually darkening face, the monk acted as if he did not see it. He said with the appearance of an eminent monk, "Benefactor, you are merciful. This poor monk will help you pass through this tribulation peacefully. I hope that Benefactor can remember Buddha's mercy and donate some money." This monk wants money? Upon hearing this, not only Xiao Chen, but even Long Qing and Xian Yuanling's expressions turned unfriendly. After saying so much, how could they not understand that this *T monk was here for money right from the start? Gu Lingyao said snappily. "Hey, didn't you say that you are a monk? Monks are particular about not having anything in their sleeves." Gu Lingyao was about to berate Tyrant, but before he finished his sentence, Xiao Chen interrupted him. "Master, please accept this small token of my respect." Xiao Chen was actually a little unhappy. However, he was unfamiliar with this place and Xiao Chen didn't want to stir up trouble. Besides, his intuition told him that this monk wasn't simple. Therefore, Xiao Chen retrieved some gold coins from his storage ring and handed them to the monk. A few gold coins were nothing to Xiao Chen. Besides, Xiao Chen basically didn't need gold coins now. However, the monk didn't even look at the gold coins that Xiao Chen handed over. His eyes were still closed as he said slowly, "Ba, this poor monk won't accept these worldly things. Benefactor, it's better for you to give this poor monk some spirit stones." Originally, they thought that this monk had changed his style or that they had misjudged him. However, after hearing this, they realized that this monk was definitely not a good person. He didn't want gold coins, but he wanted spirit stones. Moreover, his appetite was King big. Immediately, Long Qing couldn't help but shout, "Monk, don't push your luck. Get out of the way." They were no longer in the mood to continue arguing with this crazy monk. From the beginning until now, how could they not see that this monk was here for spirit stones from the beginning? In the face of the current situation, the surrounding people didn't seem to find it strange. Each of them revealed a natural expression. It seemed that this wasn't the first time this monk had done such things in Wanshan City. Everyone was completely used to it. Xiao Chen looked coldly at the monk. His tone also became extremely cold as he said, "Master, we have no intention of instigating enmity with you. I hope that you won't make a mistake." After saying that, Xiao Chen prepared to leave in a flash. It was absolutely impossible for him to give the monk spirit stones. Although a few spirit stones were nothing to Xiao Chen was very disgusted by the monk's swindling methods. Therefore, he didn't have the slightest good impression of the monk. If it wasn't for the fact that Xiao Chen had more important things to do, Xiao Chen would probably have directly taught this crazy monk a lesson. Not in the mood to argue with the monk, Xiao Chen only wanted to enter the city as soon as possible and find out where this place was. However, just as Xiao Chen passed by the monk, he heard the monk murmur softly without changing his expression, "Ba. My Buddha is merciful. Benefactor, A bloody disaster has already arrived. After saying that, Xiao Chen suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger coming from the monk. The fat monk, who originally looked very ordinary, now gave Xiao Chen an extreme sense of oppression. Moreover, before Xiao Chen could react, an invisible force directly hit Xiao Chen's abdomen without any movement from the monk. The blood in his body surged, and Xiao Chen couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Seeing Xiao Chen spit out a mouthful of blood, Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and the others at the side glared angrily. They didn't need to think to know that all of this was the monk's doing. Glaring angrily at the fat monk with a solemn expression, Long Qing shouted coldly, "Monk, you're courting death!" No one saw the monk make a move, but all of this was definitely related to the monk. Everyone's eyes were locked on the monk, and so was Xiao Chen. However, in Xiao Chen's eyes there was a trace of shock. Xiao Chen had been on guard just now, but it was useless. The monk had easily wounded him. Moreover, Xiao Chen felt a power that he had never felt before from the monk. He had never felt this kind of power even from the venerable sovereigns. The only thing that was similar to it was his master, Junwuya, who seemed to have shown this kind of power before. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 24-22. Xiao Chen looked solemnly at the monk. Facing Xiao Chen's gaze, the monk still looked solemn, as if he was not the one who had attacked just now. Xiao Chen looked solemnly at the monk. Facing Xiao Chen's gaze, the monk still looked solemn, as if he was not the one who had attacked just now. However, Xiao Chen did not make a move, but Long Qing could not hold it in any longer. He threw out a punch, and then a loud dragon roar resounded. Seeing that Long Qing was so angry that he attacked, Xiao Chen wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Judging from the monk's methods and aura, Xiao Chen already knew that this fat monk was definitely not simple. Moreover, Xiao Chen had not been able to see through the monk's cultivation until now. Logically speaking, with Xiao Chen's current strength, he could even see through the cultivation of a venerable emperor. However, Xiao Chen could not see through this monk at all. He wanted to stop Long Qing, but he did not make it in time. At the same time, facing Long Qing's angry punch, the monk was not moved at all. He put his palms together and whispered, "Amitabha, Buddha is merciful." Following the monk's words, a golden light shot up into the sky behind him. At the same time, the shadow of a Buddha slowly appeared. For a moment, the monk really gave people the feeling that Buddha was alive. The golden light was very gentle. It had to be said that the monk in front of them cultivated the purest Buddhist cultivation method. It was magnificent and righteous, without the slightest sense of evil. At the same time, with the appearance of the golden light, Long Qing was directly sent flying. Facing such an outcome, Xiao Chen and the others were stunned. The crowd were all able to tell that Long Qing had not held back in the slightest in his earlier punch. However, even with that being the case, Long Qing was unable to even touch the corner of the fat monk's clothes. From this, it could be seen that the fat monk's strength was definitely extraordinary. However, this fat monk clearly did not have the intention to kill. He did not severely injure Long Qing either. All he did was send Long Qing flying. Standing up, Long Qing looked at the fat monk in front of him with fear. His eyes were solemn. At this moment, the fat monk retracted his aura and became squared again. "I never expected to meet an ancestral dragon. Amitabha," the fat monk said as he glanced at Long Qing. Clearly, he had seen through Long Qing's identity and pointed out that Long Qing had the ancestral dragon bloodline. The fat monk's strength made everyone feel as if they were facing a great enemy. They couldn't help but feel nervous. Each and every one of them looked at the fat monk with fear. Who would have thought that they would meet such an expert in such a small city? Although they did not know the specific cultivation of the fat monk, in the eyes of the crowd, the fat monk was like a boundless and bottomless sea. It was impossible to measure. Fortunately, the fat monk did not intend to continue attacking. Instead, he looked at Xiao Chun and said with a smile, "Benefactor, this poor monk has resolved your bloody disaster. My Buddha is merciful. I hope that benefactor can give me some money." The fat monk said again. Hearing this, Xiao Chun did not hesitate. He directly took out 10 top-grade spiritual stones and handed them to the fat monk. In response, the fat monk accepted them with a smile and then left with a smile. This guy is not a good person. How can he be a monk? He stinks of money. Seeing the fat monk leave, Gu Lingyao pouted and said unhappily. Gu Lingyao was obviously very unhappy with the fat monk. In Gu Lingyao's opinion, the fat monk was not a good person. However, in response, Xiao Chun just smiled and did not say anything. He directly led the crowd into the city. Xiao Chun was not angry at this strange monk, because the fat monk did not try to kill him. Moreover, the fat monk was not weak. Xiao Chun could not see through the fat monk's cultivation. If they really fought, the crowd would not be a match for the fat monk. The fat monk did not use his strength to rob them. He just took the 10 spiritual stones and left. In Xiao Chun's opinion, with the fat monk's strength, 10 spiritual stones were probably nothing. It could only be said that the fat monk's personality was a little strange. However, Xiao Chun had just arrived in this world, and he had already met such a strange and powerful monk. Xiao Chun could not help but frown. He wondered in his heart, was this really a small world? If it was a small world, how could there be such a master? Although he was not sure, Xiao Chun was 80% sure that the fat monk's cultivation had surpassed the emperor realm. It had reached a level that Xiao Chun and the others had never heard of. He was probably much stronger than Jun Wuya and Xie Tian. How could a world with such a powerhouse be a lesser thousand world? Xiao Chun could not help but feel suspicious. Although there were some twists and turns, the crowd entered the city without any major hindrances. They first strolled around the city. Of course, Xiao Chun and the others also asked some people on the roadside, but the answers they received were more or less the same. Many people only knew that this was the Lin country's myriad mountain city. They could not answer Xiao Chun's question. After all, it was difficult for these ordinary people to answer where this place was. For ordinary people, it was already good to be able to leave the Lin country in their lifetime. Many people had not even left Myriad Mountain City in their lifetime. Therefore, they naturally knew nothing about the outside world. Somewhat helpless, in the end, Xiao Chun and the others came to the largest restaurant in Myriad Mountain City. If they wanted to inquire about information, the best place was naturally a restaurant. If they could not find the answer Xiao Chun wanted here, then they would have to go to a bigger city. As soon as they entered the restaurant, a waiter quickly came up to them. Seeing that Xiao Chun and the others had an extraordinary bearing, the waiter greeted them with a flattering smile. "Dear guests, please come in." With that, the waiter led Xiao Chun and the others into the restaurant. The first floor was the hall, which was very noisy. Xiao Chun and the others really came to inquire about information, so they did not ask for a private room and directly found a seat in the hall. However, it was really a coincidence. Just as Xiao Chun and the others were sitting down, another guest came in from outside the door. At a glance, it was actually the fat monk who was at the city gate previously. However, at this time, there were 2 scantily clad young girls beside the fat monk. At a glance, they looked like prostitutes. It was a very strange scene. A monk who was wearing a monk's robe and looked like an eminent monk at first glance was holding a beautiful young girl in one arm. There was a lecherous smile on his face, and his hands were dirty and clumsy. How was he like a monk? He was even more exaggerated than a hooligan. Furthermore, from the monk's expression, it wasn't hard to tell that he was definitely an old hand in this area. Not to mention, under his hands, the 2 girls' faces were already flushed red. They were constantly exhaling and laughing at the monk's chubby cheeks. Seeking collection, monthly votes, recommendations. Chapter 24-23. A fat monk walked into the restaurant with 2 prostitutes in his arms. Everyone was stunned when they saw this scene. However, many of them quickly recognized the monk and whispered among themselves, "It's that lecherous monk again." A fat monk walked into the restaurant with 2 prostitutes in his arms. Everyone was stunned when they saw this scene. However, many of them quickly recognized the monk and whispered among themselves, "It's that lecherous monk again." It was obvious that many of the people present knew this monk. At the same time, Gu Lingyao's expression darkened when she saw the monk. She cursed, "It's this damn monk again. Why is he always haunting us?" When Xiao Chun and his group saw the monk naturally saw Xiao Chun and his group as well. A smile immediately appeared on his face, and he took the initiative to walk towards Xiao Chun and his group. The coldness in Gu Lingyao's eyes grew stronger as she watched the monk walk toward them. However, the monk acted as if he did not see it. He walked past the restriction and came to the table where Xiao Chun and the others were sitting. He then sat down very naturally, not treating himself as an outsider at all. "Amitabha, benefactor, it seems that you and I are fated to meet. My Buddha is merciful," the monk said with a smile as he carried a woman in his arms. When Gu Lingyao heard his words, he immediately shouted in dissatisfaction, "If Buddha sees you like this, he will probably chop you up with his blade." A monk and a monk. Both of them were carrying beauties in their arms and were saying Amitabha. Wasn't this a joke? Even Xiao Chun and his group had a strange expression on their faces. It was indeed the first time that Xiao Chun and his group had seen such an eccentric monk. The monk did not seem to care about the gazes of Xiao Chun and his group. He continued to tease the 2 women beside him as he ate and drank to his heart's content. It was obvious that he did not treat himself as an outsider. Everyone was naturally dissatisfied with the monk's attitude. However, Xiao Chun was an exception. After seeing the monk twice in a row, Xiao Chun could not help but feel curious about him. The monk was definitely not an ordinary person. Furthermore, he did not harbor evil intentions. It was just that his mood was a little strange. With this thought in mind, Xiao Chun took the initiative to speak. "Great Master, I have a question that I would like to ask." Since the monk's cultivation was extraordinary, he should know where this place was. Therefore, Xiao Chun directly asked. When the monk heard Xiao Chun's question, a smile flashed across his eyes. Without waiting for Xiao Chun to ask, the monk took the lead and spoke first. "You want to know where this place is?" Xiao Chun nodded and admitted, "Indeed. Thank you for enlightening me, Grandmaster." Xiao Chun and Xiao Chun. Xiao. He had never felt like this before. Facing the monk's gaze, Xiao Chun felt as though all his secrets were about to be seen through. He could not hide them at all. He felt as though he was naked in front of everyone. But soon, the monk retracted his gaze. At the same time, he chuckled and said, "I advise you to give up on the thought in your heart. That black hole is one way. It's easy to come in, but difficult to go back." Although he did not answer the question, when they heard the monk's words, not only Xiao Chun, but also Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, and the others' expressions changed drastically. They looked at the monk in unison and asked, "Who exactly are you?" The monk's words made everyone's heart sink. How did he know all this? Moreover, according to the monk's words, could it be that they could not go back? Facing everyone's gazes, the monk smiled and said, "Me? I'm just a monk. Ha ha." As he said that, he kissed the face of the woman beside him. His greasy mouth stained the woman's face. However, the monk did not care at all. Instead, he laughed loudly. "Aya, you're so naughty." The woman was embarrassed by the monk. Looking at the monk's appearance, everyone's faces were filled with black lines. Only Xiao Chun became more and more curious and asked. The monk gave Xiao Chun an extraordinary feeling. In addition to his words just now, it seemed that the monk had already guessed their situation. Therefore, he advised Xiao Chen to give up. Xiao Chen continued to ask unwillingly. However, no matter how much Xiao Chen asked, the monk kept evading the topic. Moreover, from time to time, he would say some dirty words to the two women, causing Gu Lingyao, Tianyue, and Hongxiu to look at him with disdain. Of course, the monk naturally sized up Gu Lingyao and the other two women. Under the influence of the alcohol, he even shook his head and said, "Tsk, tsk, tsk, you three little girls. Not bad, not bad. You're almost comparable to my palace master's wife." The lecherous look in his eyes made Gu Lingyao and the other two women clench their teeth. They could not wait to tear this lecherous monk apart on the spot. However, Xiao Chen was keenly aware that although the monk looked lecherous, he deliberately turned his face when he looked at Gu Lingyao and the other two women. At least in the depths of his eyes, the monk's gaze was clear. Just as everyone was drinking, on the other side, the city lord's mansion of Wanshan City was in an uproar. No one knew when a Taoist priest had appeared in the city lord's mansion. Moreover, he had kidnapped the concubine of the city lord's mansion of Wanshan City. In the main hall of the city lord's mansion, the city lord of Wanshan City, Yan He, sat on the main seat with a gloomy face. He had just brought his concubine back to the mansion 3 days ago. Her appearance was definitely outstanding. However, who would have thought that she would be kidnapped before he even had a chance to taste her? Moreover, it was in broad daylight. Idiots, a bunch of trash. There are so many of you and you actually let a stinky Taoist priest kidnap her right in front of your eyes? Yan He scolded furiously as he looked at the guards of the city lord's mansion who were kneeling on the ground. This concubine was originally an ordinary girl from a village near Wanshan City. However, she was indeed exceptionally beautiful. Yan He had only met this girl by chance. With just one look, Yan He was completely infatuated. Subsequently, he used some underhanded means to kill the girl's parent. Then, he forcefully brought the girl back to Wanshan City and made her his concubine. She was originally a duck on the chopping board, a piece of fatty meat that was about to reach his mouth. However, who would have thought that a stinky Taoist priest would appear out of nowhere and kidnap the girl in broad daylight? After being scolded by Yan He, the guards of the city lord's mansion lowered their heads and did not dare to show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. After venting his anger, Yan He's mood calmed down a little. Then, he shouted in a deep voice, "Seal the city and find them. Even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground, you must find that stinky Taoist priest and the little beauty for me. I want to see who exactly dares to provoke me." Hearing Yan He's words, everyone in the hall responded respectfully. Yes. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 24:24. His new concubine had been kidnapped by a stinky Taoist. As the governor of Wanshan City, Yan He naturally wouldn't let it go so easily. He immediately gave the order to seal the city. No matter what, he had to find that stinky Taoist. After Yan He gave the order to seal the city, the entire Wanshan City was quickly sealed off. These guys even activated the city protection array. It could be said that they were mighty. Hearing this, many people had a premonition that something big was about to happen. However, Xiao Chen and the others who were in the restaurant were completely unaware of it. After drinking and chatting, Xiao Chen and the monk gradually became familiar with each other. Putting aside the monk's strange temperament, Xiao Chen felt that he was a good guy. He had a straightforward personality. Although what he did wasn't what a monk should do, it had nothing to do with Xiao Chen. However, the only thing that Xiao Chen felt was a pity was that no matter how many questions he asked about this world, the monk would only answer him with a smile and never give him a direct answer. This made Xiao Chen feel extremely helpless. Just as everyone was drinking and chatting, and the monk was hugging women, another Taoist walked in from outside the door. Beside him was a beautiful young girl. Looking at the Taoist priest's bootlicking appearance, Everyone felt as if their worldview had been destroyed. What was going on today? A monk was still hugging girls, and now, a Taoist priest had appeared. Furthermore, he was licking the girl's boot-licking appearance. Facing this, the girl appeared to be somewhat fearful. It looked like a lecherous Taoist who had abducted and sold a good woman. However, the Taoist priest did not pay any attention to the gazes of the surrounding people. His gaze quickly locked onto the monk, and he strode over. As he walked, he shouted, "Stinky monk, you're King delicious." He scolded unhappily. Hearing this, Xiao Chun and the others also looked over. They saw a Taoist who was wearing a Taoist robe and had a body shape that was completely opposite of a monk. He strode over. The fat monk and the skinny Taoist priest. How should one put it? Indeed, there was an indescribable feeling when these two fellows were together. Furthermore, there was a young lady following behind the Taoist. When they reached the table, the Taoist pulled out a chair for himself just like the monk. Then, he said to the young lady behind him in a flattering manner, "Little beauty, come and cook. Eat something. Don't worry, with this Taoist master here, everything will be fine." Looking at the Taoist priest's flattering smile, Xiao Qin and the others were speechless. What kind of weirdo was this? Compared to the helplessness of Xiao Qin and the others, Tyrant said nonchalantly, "These are my new friends. That's Xiao Qin. He's a nice guy. Haha." After a round of introductions, the monk turned his gaze to the young girl beside the Taoist priest. He frowned and said, "I say, are you crazy? You even want to mess with a woman from her maiden family?" The monk's meaning was obvious. He thought that the Taoist priest had forcefully abducted a woman from a good family. However, the Taoist priest did not hold back and directly scolded, "T, this Taoist master is just helping out when he sees injustice." Then, the Taoist priest briefly told the story of the young lady. He learned that the young lady's name was Chen Yener. She was the new concubine of the Wanshan city's lord, Yan He. Hearing about Chen Yener's experience, Gu Lingyao and the other two were naturally filled with righteous indignation. After all, Yan He's actions were indeed worse than a beast. Taking a fancy to her beauty, he wanted to kill her parent. What kind of logic was this? He was worse than a beast. Sympathizing with Chen Yener's experience, Gu Lingyao and the other two took the initiative to chat with Chen Yener out of kindness. Perhaps because they were all women, Chen Yener was obviously not so hostile towards Gu Lingyao and the other two. Therefore, the four women began to chat after a short while. When the Taoist priest saw Chen Yener and Gu Lingyao chatting happily, a smile flashed across his eyes. Although the Taoist priest had always shown a lustful look towards Chen Yener, it seemed that he was no different from Yang Song. He also coveted Chen Yener's beauty. However, along the way, the Taoist priest had never forced Chen Yener to do anything, nor did he do anything to Chen Yener. Therefore, in the Taoist priest's heart, his purpose was actually very simple. He wanted to save Chen Yener. As for his behavior, it could be said that the Taoist priest deliberately pretended to be lustful, or it could be said that it was his nature. However, although the Taoist priest was lustful, he also knew that a gentleman's desire for money was justified. Obviously, he would not do something worse than a beast like Yan He. He minded his own business and drank wine. He even rudely snatched a woman from the monk and held her in his arms. Looking at the monk and the Taoist priest in front of him, Xiao Chun really admired these two people. Even with such a character, they were actually monks. The monk and the Taoist priest were having fun. However, this happy moment did not last long. Soon, Yan He found the Taoist priest's whereabouts. After knowing that the Taoist priest had kidnapped his concubine, not only did he not run away, but he actually swaggered to the largest restaurant in Wanshan City to have fun. Knowing this, Yan He was so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. He immediately brought his men and hurried to the restaurant. With a gloomy face, Yen He strode into the restaurant and saw the monk and the Taoist priest with a lewd smile. Seeing that the two of them were drinking and having fun as if nothing had happened, the veins on Yen He's forehead bulged. He angrily shouted, "What a reckless and stupid Taoist priest!" Following Yen He's scolding, the Taoist priest turned his head and saw Yen He at a glance. He immediately got up and flicked the horsetail whisk in his hand. With a righteous face, he said, "Immeasurable deity, what business does this benefactor have with this humble Taoist?" The speed of this exchange was comparable to flipping a book. However, Yen He was completely furious. What business? Damn it, this stupid Taoist priest had kidnapped his concubine, and now, he actually pretended not to know him. He even asked him what business he had with him. He had seen thick-skinned people before, but he had never seen such a thick-skinned person. Yen He clenched his fists until they made cracking sounds. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot as he said, "Stupid Taoist priest, you kidnapped my concubine, and now you're still putting on an act. Do you think you can fool me like this?" Hearing Yen He's words, the Taoist priest's face instantly revealed a trace of doubt. That expression was simply worthy of being called an award-winning actor. It was as if he really did not know Yen He. Not only that, the Taoist priest's next sentence stunned Yen He, Shao Chun and the rest. Immeasurable deity, this benefactor must be joking. This humble monk is a monk. How could I kidnap someone's concubine? Could it be that this benefactor has mistaken me for someone else? Bullshit, if that's the case, then who is the young lady sitting beside you? You're serious without any evidence. Stupid Taoist priest, you still want to quibble? Yen He angrily scolded. In response, he pointed at Shao Chun and the rest unhurriedly and said without changing his expression, "This young lady is with these benefactors. This humble Taoist does not know her. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 24-25. Taoist priest pointed at Shao Chun and the rest with an innocent face. Upon hearing his words, Shao Chun and the rest were speechless. This guy changed his face too quickly. Furthermore, his acting skills were absolutely superb. Taoist priest pointed at Shao Chun and the rest with an innocent face. Upon hearing his words, Shao Chun and the rest were speechless. This guy changed his face too quickly. Furthermore, his acting skills were absolutely superb. Just a moment ago, he brought Chun Yenner in with a flattering face. Now that she was here, he said that he didn't know Chun Yenner. This, not only the Taoist priest, but even the monk beside him also said solemnly. Amitabha, benefactor, this poor monk is a monk. I don't get close to women. As soon as the monk said that, not only Yen He, but Shao Chun and the rest were also taken aback. Don't get close to women? Then what were you hugging just now? A stone. Yen He was enraged by the monk and the Taoist priest. He immediately shouted, "Do you two think I'm a 3-year-old child? Enough nonsense. Hand her over. Otherwise, you won't be able to walk out of Wanshan City today." As he said that, Yen He also looked at Chun Yenner, who was terrified. However, when he saw Gu Lingyao and the other two girls beside Chun Yenner, Yen He was stunned. Then, his eyes suddenly revealed a fiery look. He thought that Chun Yenner was already a first-class beauty. He didn't expect that Gu Lingyao and the other two girls were even more beautiful than Chun Yenner. There was actually such a beautiful woman in the world. The look in his eyes became extremely fiery at this moment. Noticing the change in Yen He's eyes, Shao Chen's eyes also revealed a trace of coldness. This Yen He was really bold. At the same time, under Yen He's gaze, Gu Lingyao and the other two girls' faces turned gloomy. In an instant, the Taoist priest, who was the initiator, stood aside and watched the show. TSK, there is indeed something wrong with this fellow's brain. He didn't even look at her strength and actually dared to have such thoughts. The Taoist priest curled his lips and looked at Yen He with a look of pity as he muttered, With Taoist priests' cultivation, he had naturally seen through the cultivation of Xiao Chen and the others. With Xiao Chen's cultivation, killing Yan He was simply too easy. Not to mention that Yan He was just the city lord of a small Wanshan city. Even the royal family of the Lin Kingdom would not be a match for Xiao Chen and the others. Of course, the Taoist priest and the monk's cultivation were stronger. However, with their personalities, it was better for them not to fight if they could. She was happy to watch the show from the side. At this time Yan He said recklessly, "Oh, there are 3 more beauties. Haha, not bad, not bad. Bring them back to my residence." His eyes never left Gu Lingyao and the other 2 girls. Hearing this, Tian Yu was the first to stand up and point at Yan He. Yan He's cultivation was at most equivalent to the immortal king realm. With such strength, he was simply too weak in front of Tian Yu. Facing Tian Yu's finger, Yan He, who was still daring in his lust a second ago, did not even have time to react in the next second. The finger light pierced through his forehead and he died on the spot. Therefore, Yan He was really daring in his lust. In a situation where he did not know the strength of Xiao Chen and the others, he actually dared to have such thoughts. If this was not courting death, what was it? Seeing that Yan He was killed on the spot with just a finger, the guards of the city lord's residence who came with Yan He were all stunned. At this time, Tian Yu also shouted angrily, "Get lost." Hearing Tian Yu's words, these people did not dare to stay any longer. They immediately fled and did not even have time to take Yan He's body away. Yan He's matter was nothing to Xiao Chen's group, the monk and the Taoist priest. At most, it was just a small interlude. After dealing with Yan He, everyone was almost done eating. At this time, the monk took the initiative to speak to Xiao Chen. "Brother Xiao Chen, what do you plan to do next?" The monk had been unwilling to tell Xiao Chen where this world was, and Xiao Chen was really helpless about it. At this time, hearing the monk's words, he did not hide his thoughts and said bluntly, "Find a way to go back." Xiao Chen was indeed looking for a way to return to the Great Thousand World. Xiao Chen did not know the current situation of the Great Thousand World. Moreover, the battle between the good and evil had not ended yet. Xiao Chen really did not have the heart to think about other things. However, after hearing Xiao Chen's answer, the monk shook his head and said, "Brother Xiao Chen, if I'm not wrong, you should have come to this world through the black hole, right?" After chatting with Xiao Chen, the monk already knew that Xiao Chen and the others were not from this world. Of course, Xiao Chen did not tell the monk about the Great Thousand World because the monk also did not tell him and the others about his origin. They had only met twice. Although they hit it off, Xiao Chen did not go so far as to tell everything to the monk. Hearing the monk's words, Xiao Chen did not answer, but he did not deny it either. Seeing this, the monk took a sip of wine and said, "Actually, the monk and I are the same. We are not from this world. Like you, the monk and I came to this world through the black hole. Moreover, I have already told you before that the black hole is not two-way, but one-way. It is not so easy to return to the world you came from," the monk said bluntly. Hearing this, Xiao Chen fell into silence. He did not think that the monk was lying to him because there was no need to. Whether it was the monk or the monk, Xiao Chen was sure that their strength was above his, even above Jun Wuya's. With a cultivation higher than Jun Wuya's, it was almost certain that they had surpassed the sovereign realm. There was no need for such an existence to lie to him. However, even though the monk said so, Xiao Chen still had no intention of giving up. The reason was very simple. He had to return to the Great Thousand World. Looking at the monk, Xiao Chen said faintly, "Master, I have a reason to go back." In a simple sentence, Xiao Chen gave his answer. In response, the monk said with a smile, "There is only one way to go. That is to get the consent of the World Master of this world. Only then can you leave." "World Master?" Hearing this, a hint of doubt flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. In the Great Thousand World, he had never heard of the World Master. He only knew about Tenzu, but he had never heard of the World Master. Not knowing what the World Master meant, Xiao Chen asked, "Master, may I ask who the World Master is?" Xiao Chen had indeed never heard of the World Master. In this regard, the monk did not hide anything this time. He simply told Xiao Chen about the World Master. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 24-26. Xiao Chen didn't know anything about the World Lord because there was no World Lord in the boundless world. According to Tyrant, the World Lord was a person recognized by a world. To put it bluntly, it was an existence that the heavenly way submitted to. Xiao Chen didn't know anything about the World Lord because there was no World Lord in the boundless world. According to Tyrant, the World Lord was a person recognized by a world. To put it bluntly, it was an existence that the heavenly way submitted to. It was a simple explanation. Tyrant looked at Xiao Chen and said with a smile, "Brother Xiao Chen, the world you're from doesn't have a World Lord yet, right?" "Yes." Xiao Chen nodded and did not try to hide anything. The boundless world indeed didn't have a World Lord. According to Tyrant, the Tenzu of the boundless world hadn't chosen to submit to anyone, so naturally, there wasn't a World Lord. In a world, the Tenzu was created by heaven and earth. It was responsible for setting the rules of the world and ensuring the normal operation of the world. The World Lord could be said to be the protector of the world. Even the Tenzu had no choice but to submit to it. Of course, the World Lord could only be born if the Tenzu chose to submit to it. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the World Lord could be said to be the strongest person in the world, and its strength was above the Tenzu's. After talking about the World Lord, Tyrant talked about this world. According to Tyrant, this world was called the Primordial World. It was vast and boundless, and there were many powerful beings in it. After learning the name of this world, Xiao Chen asked curiously, "Master, so you guys..." Xiao Chen also realized that Tyrant and Taoist priest weren't from the Primordial World. Tyrant didn't hide the truth. "Oh, we're not from the Primordial World. Just like you, we came from another world." Tyrant had no intention of hiding anything from Xiao Chen. He quickly told Xiao Chen that they had come from the outside world. Moreover, Tyrant and the others had come to the Hongmeng world for a different purpose than Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen and the others were being hunted down. They had no choice but to take the risk and come to the primordial world. As for the monk and the Taoist priest, they came to the primordial world of their own accord. According to Tyrant, there was also a black hole in their macro world. This black hole was connected to the Hongmeng world. Tyrant, Taoist, and the others came from a force called Cloud Palace. This time, they followed Cloud Palace's palace master to the Hongmeng world to understand this world. Of course, Cloud Palace's palace master also wanted to exchange pointers with the world lord of the Hongmeng world. As one's cultivation grew stronger, one would realize that this world was boundless. Those with weak cultivation would think that the world was only as big as what they saw. However, when one truly stood at the peak, one would realize that this world was much bigger than what one could imagine. Xiao Chen naturally did not know who the Cloud Palace's palace master that Tyrant mentioned was. He also did not know what Cloud Palace represented in the macro world. However, Xiao Chen could still make out something from Tyrant's words. The Hongmeng world and the macro world were probably existences similar to the Great Thousand World. They also contained countless small thousand worlds. Moreover, world lords had already been born in the Hongmeng world and the macro world, unlike the Great Thousand World, which had yet to have a world lord. As such, the martial Tao of these two macro worlds was naturally much stronger than that of the Great Thousand World. At the very least, they had masters who surpassed the Emperor realm. The cultivation realm above the Emperor realm had always been a mystery in the Great Thousand World. Even Jun Wuya and Xie Tian were only half a step away from surpassing the Emperor realm. They did not know anything about the realms after the Emperor realm. Xiao Chen was very curious about this. He could not help but ask, "Grandmaster, may I ask what your realm is?" "Oh, it's just the Ancestor Realm Great Perfection," Tyrant said with a smile. The Ancestor Realm was the realm after the Emperor realm. Tyrant and Taoist priest were now at the Ancestor Realm Great Perfection. Such a cultivation could be said to be invincible in the Great Thousand World. However, in the Macro World and the Hong Meng World, they were not the strongest masters because there were still world lords above them. Xiao Chen benefited a lot from the conversation with Tyrant. At the same time, his horizons were broadened a lot. Xiao Chen realized that there were so many masters outside the Great Thousand World. Sighing softly, Xiao Chen secretly sighed in his heart, "The martial Tao has no limit." It's true that the Great Thousand World is just a drop in the ocean in the vast universe. Xiao Chen understood the universe from Tyrant's words. Xiao Chen was shocked by this. Looking at Xiao Chen's appearance, Tyrant said with a smile, "Brother Xiao Chen, there is only one way for you to return to your Great Thousand World, and that is to get the recognition of the World Lord of the Hong Meng World. If you don't mind, we can travel together and meet our palace master first. How about it?" Tyrant had a good impression of Xiao Chen, so he took the initiative to ask to travel together. In Tyrant's opinion, Xiao Chen could not return to the Great Thousand World without the help of his palace master. This was because only his palace master could talk to the World Lord of the Hong Meng World. With Xiao Chen's strength, he was not even comparable to Tyrant and Taoist. Not to mention getting the approval of the World Lord of the Hong Meng World, it was uncertain whether he could even meet him. Hearing Tyrant's words, Xiao Chen naturally knew that Tyrant wanted to help him. Moreover, Xiao Chen was indeed in a hurry to return to the Great Thousand World, so he gladly nodded and agreed. Seeing that Xiao Chen had agreed, a simple and honest smile appeared on Tyrant's face. He gulped down the wine in his cup, stood up and said, "Let's go then. We've been out for quite some time. It's time to go back." Tyrant and Taoist originally came to the Hong Meng World with a group of masters from the Cloud Palace. However, the two of them were bored and came out alone. After such a long time, it was time to go back. However, before they left, they had to deal with Chen Yenner's matter. Tyrant looked at Taoist and Taoist understood. He then asked Chen Yenner, "Little beauty, what do you plan to do next?" Hearing Taoist address her as Taoist, Chen Yenner was a little helpless, but then she said in a lonely voice, "I don't know." Chen Yenner's parents had been killed. Now that she was a woman with no one to rely on, she did not know what to do in the future. Tyrant smiled and said, "Then, do you want to be a warrior in the future or just an ordinary person?" With Tyrant's ability, he could easily make arrangements for Chen Yenner. If Chen Yenner wanted to be an ordinary person, Tyrant could give her a large sum of money and let her live a life of luxury. If Chen Yenner wanted to be a warrior, Tyrant could also make arrangements for her. However, how far she could go in the end would depend on her own ability. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 24-27. The death of her parents was a huge blow to Chen Yenner. Therefore, after hearing what the monk said, Chen Yenner gritted her teeth and asked fearfully, "Can I?" The death of her parents was a huge blow to Chen Yenner. Therefore, after hearing what the monk said, Chen Yenner gritted her teeth and asked fearfully, "Can I?" Although there was no direct answer, everyone already knew what Chen Yenner meant. She wanted to cultivate and become a warrior. To Chen Yenner, who grew up in a village, a warrior was a lofty existence. She had never thought that she could become a warrior one day. However, after experiencing this incident, she wanted to become stronger so that she could at least protect herself. However, Chen Yenner was an ordinary girl after all. She naturally didn't have much confidence in becoming a warrior. Tyrant laughed heartily and said, "Haha, don't worry. Anything is possible as long as you want it. Since it was Taoist priest who rescued Chen Yen'er, he naturally wouldn't abandon her. After Chen Yen'er agreed, tyrant and Taoist priest decided to bring her back to Cloud Palace. Anyway, given the strength of Cloud Palace, it wouldn't be a problem for them to nurture her. After settling the matter, everyone was ready to leave after eating and drinking. At the same time, it was already dusk outside Myriad Mountain City. However, there was indeed a luxurious carriage descending from the sky. 4 white horses pulled the carriage and galloped through the air before landing steadily outside Myriad Mountain City. As the carriage landed, a majestic middle-aged man strode down from the carriage. Upon seeing the middle-aged man, a guard of Myriad Mountain City, who had been waiting for a long time, greeted him respectfully. "Greetings, Your Highness." The man was the Western Garrison Lord of Lin Country. He was definitely a figure with real power in Lin Country. His cultivation base had also reached the immortal Emperor realm. He nodded calmly and asked faintly, "Where is he?" "Your Highness, he's still in the city," the guard replied respectfully. The Western Garrison Lord had personally come to Myriad Mountain City because of Yen He. Yen He wasn't just the city lord of Myriad Mountain City, he was also the nephew of the Western Garrison Lord. It was also because of this that Yen He, who was only the governor of Wanshan City, dared to be so unscrupulous. Knowing that Yen He had been killed, the Western Garrison Liege Lord immediately rushed over. Following the arrival of the Western Garrison Liege Lord, the guards of the Wanshan City also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. With the Liege Lord personally overseeing the city, they wanted to see what the foreign brats could do. With that, the Western Garrison Liege Lord took the lead and walked into the city, followed closely by a troop of over 1,000 city guards. In the city, the citizens of Wanshan City naturally avoided the Western Garrison Liege Lord when they saw him striding over. Outside the restaurant, Xiao Chun and the others, who had just finished their meal, walked out of the restaurant and saw the Western Garrison Liege Lord leading his men. Both sides met directly. Looking at the aggressive Lord Jinshi, the monk smiled and said to the Taoist, "You really poked a hornet's nest." Needless to say, this person was definitely here to avenge Yen He. He had just killed Yen He and this person had come. Who would believe that it wasn't because of Yen He? Upon hearing the monk's words, the Taoist smiled indifferently and said, "It's just some small trouble. How can it be considered a hornet's nest?" While they were talking, they didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Even when the Western Garrison Liege Lord arrived in front of them, the monk and the Taoist were still calm. The Western Garrison Liege Lord furrowed his brows when he saw the unchanging expressions of the crowd. Then, he asked with an icy expression, "Are you the ones who killed Yen He? So what if we are?" These words came from Xiao Chun. To be honest, Xiao Chun didn't put a puny immortal Emperor Realm cultivator in his eyes. Xiao Chun wasn't afraid at all when he saw through the Western Garrison Liege Lord's cultivation base. However, the Western Garrison Liege Lord was infuriated. The guard beside him also shouted angrily, "How dare you disrespect the Liege Lord? I think you are courting death." Liege Lord? This identity was indeed very honorable in the spiritual fruit world. However, it was nothing in the eyes of Xiao Chun and the others. Given the cultivation base of Xiao Chun and the others, they were no longer interested in the power and influence of the secular world. Although the Lin country seemed to be unparalleled, Xiao Chun and the others could destroy it with a flip of their hand. Therefore, they naturally didn't value the Liege Lord. Not to mention a Liege Lord, even the Emperor of the Lin country was nothing in the eyes of Xiao Chun and the others. After knowing the identity of the Western Garrison Liege Lord, they thought that Xiao Chun and the others would be fearful. Unfortunately, Xiao Chun and the others were still unmoved. Xiao Chun said indifferently, "You are here for the matter of Yen He, right? That man deserves to be killed. That's all. You can leave now." Xiao Chun wasn't interested in these ants. However, there were always some people who were seeking death in this world. Originally, Xiao Chen didn't want to lower himself to the same level as these people. However, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, the Western Garrison liege lord shouted coldly, "Deserve to be killed? So, if I kill you now, it's also my right to kill you?" The attitude of Xiao Chen and the others made the Western Garrison liege lord even angrier. With his status, people would be respectful and reverent wherever he went. However, Xiao Chen and the others only looked at him with indifference. It was like a giant looking at an ant. Following the words of the Western Garrison liege lord, thousands of city guards immediately surrounded Xiao Chen and the others. Being surrounded, Xiao Chen's eyes were cold. He didn't want to argue with these ants, but they didn't know what was good for them. Xiao Chen was indeed not a murderous person, nor was he a person who liked to bully the weak. He was also not a person who liked to argue with ants. However, even if Xiao Chen wasn't such a person, with Xiao Chen's cultivation, status, how could he allow these ants to provoke him? Immediately, Xiao Chen turned his head to look at the Western Garrison liege lord and said indifferently, "Are you sure you want to do this? Do you know the consequences?" "Consequences? Haha, ignorant brat, you dare to talk to me about consequences? This is simply the biggest joke in the world." The Western Garrison liege lord laughed loudly. The Western Garrison liege lord didn't take Xiao Chen seriously at all. Facing this, Xiao Chen's expression didn't change. He said indifferently, "It seems that the Lin Kingdom can be destroyed." With a single sentence, Xiao Chen wanted to destroy the Lin Kingdom. Hearing this, the Western Garrison liege lord's expression darkened. However, this time, before he could say anything, Xiao Chen spoke first. "Wang Songxue, Sect Master." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Wang Songxue cupped his hands and replied. As his voice fell, a soaring aura exploded from Wang Songxue's body. As soon as the aura of the End Realm appeared, it instantly made the Western Garrison liege lord and the others feel like ducks that were being strangled by their neck. Their faces instantly turned ugly. Just the aura alone made it difficult for the Western Garrison liege lord and the others to breathe. And this was the result of Wang Songxue not targeting them. As long as Wang Songxue wanted, just the pressure of the End Realm alone was enough to crush the Western Garrison liege lord and the others to death. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 24-28. Wang Xuesong's End Realm cultivation erupted. Facing the aura emitted from Wang Xuesong's body, the expression of Lord Jinshi and the others changed drastically. Previously, they didn't see through the cultivation realm of Xiao Chen's group. However, as Wang Xuesong's aura erupted, they understood that Xiao Chen's group was in existence they couldn't afford to offend. Wang Xuesong's End Realm cultivation erupted. Facing the aura emitted from Wang Xuesong's body, the expression of Lord Jinshi and the others changed drastically. Previously, they didn't see through the cultivation realm of Xiao Chen's group. However, as Wang Xuesong's aura erupted, they understood that Xiao Chen's group was in existence they couldn't afford to offend. With a pale face, the Western Garrison liege lord wanted to beg for mercy, but Wang Xuesong obviously didn't give him the chance. A terrifying pressure instantly descended from Wang Xuesong's body. In an instant, the Western Garrison liege lord and the others were directly pressed to the ground. There seemed to be wounds on his body that were suppressing him. Blood spurted out from the corners of his eyes and nostrils. Bearing the enormous pressure, Lord Jinshi gritted his teeth and said, "Senior, spare my life." Lord Jinshi begged for mercy. However, before he could finish his words, he was crushed into a meat patty by Wang Xuesong's terrifying aura. Wang Xuesong didn't hold back at all. Xiao Chen's meaning was clear. Xiao Chen had completely lost his patience with these two groups of ants that provoked him. In an instant, Lord Jinshi and the others were all killed. Lord Jinxi's death in Wanshan City was definitely a shocking matter for the Lin country. After all, Lord Jinxi wasn't only one of the few immortal emperor experts in the Lin country, he was also the younger brother of the current Lin country's emperor. However, Xiao Qin didn't care about this at all. Moreover, was it enough to just kill Lord Jinxi? Don't forget that Xiao Qin had already said that there was no need for the Lin country to exist. Master Daoist, can you accompany me to the imperial capital? After Wang Xuesong killed Western Garrison Liege and the others, Xiao Qin asked the monk and Daoist with a smile. The monk and the Daoist priest naturally understood why Xiao Qin wanted to go to the imperial capital. They didn't refuse and nodded lightly. It's fine. This lingua is indeed annoying. The monk and the Daoist priest were not ordinary monks. Although one of them was a monk and the other was a Daoist priest, the blood on their hands was probably no less than that of Xiao Qin. He planned to take a detour to the imperial capital and destroy the Lin kingdom. Hearing the conversation between Xiao Qin and the monk, Chen Yenner had a complicated look in her eyes. Seeing Wang Xuesong kill the high and mighty Western Garrison Liege in an instant without even moving a finger, Chen Yenner thought that Western Garrison Liege was already a top figure. However, such a big figure was still squashed to death like an ant. Unconsciously, a desire for power arose in her heart. Chen Yenner wanted to be like Wang Xuesong, who had the ability to control her own fate. She also wanted to be like Xiao Qin, who could decide the life and death of others with a single word. However, it might be difficult for Chen Yenner to realize this dream in her lifetime. With her talent, not to mention Xiao Qin, even Wang Xuesong would find it difficult to achieve it. After all, Chen Yenner wasn't a genius with incredible talent. The monk and the Daoist priest were willing to help her only because of fate. Under normal circumstances, Chen Yenner would probably be an ordinary disciple of the Cloud Palace in the future. There wouldn't be anything special about her. However, even so, it was enough for Chen Yenner. At least she could control her own fate and wouldn't be as powerless as she was now. Xiao Qin and the others naturally didn't know what Chen Yenner was thinking. At this time, Xiao Qin directly took out the spatial spirit boat. Everyone boarded the boat and then disappeared into the sky. Brother Xiao Qin, your spatial spirit boat is pretty good. In the cabin, everyone sat together, and the Daoist priest said with a smile. In response, Xiao Qin smiled and didn't say anything. Xiao Qin and the others hurried to the imperial capital of the Lin kingdom. At the same time, the news that Western Garrison Liege was killed in the Wanshan city was immediately known by the emperor of the Lin kingdom. As the Western Garrison Liege of the Lin kingdom and a member of the royal family, he naturally had his own life token in the imperial palace. Therefore, as soon as Western Garrison Liege was killed, the emperor of the Lin kingdom already knew. At this time, in a palace in the imperial palace, the emperor of the Lin kingdom, who was wearing a dragon robe, said to a general with a gloomy face, Who killed Western Garrison Liege? I'm going to kill all 9 generations of his family." The emperor of the Lin country and the Western Garrison Lord were blood brothers. The relationship between the two of them was extremely good. The death of the Western Garrison Lord had indeed infuriated the emperor. In the face of the emperor's fury, the general below spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, Western Garrison Liege was killed in the Wanshan city. It is said that he was killed by several mysterious experts. They shouldn't be warriors from the Lin kingdom." The Lin kingdom's royal family's speed was not slow. They had already figured out the ins and outs of the matter so quickly. However, this was also very normal. If they could not even do this, then how could the Lin kingdom's royal family control such a huge country? However, that was all the information that the Lin kingdom's royal family had. As for the identity and cultivation of Xiao Qin and the others, the Lin kingdom's royal family knew nothing about them. Hearing the general's words, the emperor of the Lin kingdom's eyes flashed with coldness. Then, he said coldly, "Find them." Find them at all costs. I want to see them alive and dead. The emperor of the Lin kingdom directly ordered the capture of Shao Chun and the others. Hearing this, the general also responded respectfully, yes. As the general left the main hall, the coldness in the emperor of the Lin kingdom's eyes did not disappear. However, he was no longer angry. According to the information that he had, the other party killed Western Garrison Liege in an instant. It seemed that their strength was not weak. After all, Western Garrison Liege was an immortal emperor. To be able to kill him in an instant, one had to be at least a great perfection immortal emperor. Although he had already realized that Shao Chun and the others were not weak, the emperor of the Lin kingdom still insisted on avenging Western Garrison Liege. It was not for any other reason but because the Lin kingdom had its own confidence. Although an immortal emperor was considered an expert in the Lin kingdom, it was definitely not the top. On the surface, the strongest expert in the Lin kingdom was already an immortal emperor. But in the dark, didn't the Lin kingdom have its own strength? This was obviously impossible. Therefore, a group of suspected immortal emperor experts was not enough to make the Lin kingdom fearful. Do you think you can behave atrociously in my Lin kingdom just because you are an immortal emperor? Humph. The emperor of the Lin kingdom snorted coldly and murmured in a deep voice. He only guessed that Shao Chun and the others were in the immortal emperor realm. However, the emperor of the Lin kingdom obviously did not realize that the Lin kingdom was facing an imminent disaster. It was not whether the emperor wanted to arrest Shao Chun and the others. Instead, it was because Shao Chun and the others were on their way to the imperial capital. As for the purpose of going to the imperial capital, it was needless to say. A disaster was about to befall. It was ridiculous that the emperor of the Lin kingdom was still unaware of it. Seeking collection, monthly vote recommendation. Chapter 24-29. Following the order of the emperor of Lin country, many experts of Lin country quickly moved out and joined in the search for Shao Chun and his group. The emperor said that he wanted to see them if they were alive and their corpses if they were dead, regardless of whether they were dead or alive. In an instant, many experts of Lin country and even the army joined in the search for Shao Chun and his group. As for Shao Chun and his group, they didn't intend to hide in the face of the Lin country's arrest. They swaggered towards the imperial capital of Lin country. As such, it was easy for the Lin country to find the whereabouts of Shao Chun and his group. In a short day, Shao Chun and his group encountered 6 or 7 encirclement. However, facing these experts of Lin country, Shao Chun didn't even need to do anything. Wang Songxue, Li Ku, and the rest were more than enough to deal with them. For a small Lin country, not to mention an End Realm expert, even a Dao Realm expert would be hard for the Lin country to deal with. Although such an ordinary encirclement didn't pose any threat to Shao Chun and his group, it was still a little annoying. Even Monk said helplessly, "The royal family of Lin country is probably stupid." They were clearly ants, but they didn't know how to respect them at all. They even dared to send people to encircle and kill Shao Chun and his group without knowing anything about them. Weren't they afraid of bringing disaster to the Lin country? Hearing this, Shao Chun smiled and didn't say anything. What was the best way to deal with an ant jumping around in front of you? Naturally, it was to kill it with a slap. Since the royal family of Lin country wanted to die, Shao Chun would fulfill their wish. Just as the few of them were talking, on the deck, Li Ku, Wang Songxue, and the other 2 End Realm experts looked at the 100,000-strong army of Lin country that appeared in front of them. Obviously, this army had figured out the route of Shao Chun and his group, and had been waiting here for a long time. Sending out 100,000-strong army to kill Shao Chun and his group? The emperor of the Lin country was indeed stubborn. Seeing the situation, Li Ku came to the cabin and said respectfully to Shao Chun, "Sect Master, there are 100,000 soldiers of the Lin country ahead. What do you think of us?" What Li Ku meant was to ask Shao Chen if they needed to take a detour. Although 100,000 soldiers were a lot, they definitely wouldn't be able to catch up with the spatial spirit boat. However, Shao Chen indifferently said, "Just destroy them. There must be something wrong with the emperor of the Lin country. After so many people died, he still didn't give up. He even dared to send 100,000 soldiers to kill him. Did he think that he didn't dare to kill? Or did he think that he was a good person? The strong might not care about the provocation of the weak." However, if the provocation came again and again, it would definitely lead to self-destruction, just like the current emperor of the country of Lin. "Kill this army of 100,000. Hearing Shao Chen's question, Li Ku did not say much. He nodded respectfully and then strode out of the cabin. Shao Chen didn't know that the 100,000 soldiers in front of him were the most elite army of the country of Lin. They were all made up of warriors. Moreover, the commander of this army was an expert of the perfection immortal emperor realm. This army could be said to be the foundation of the country of Lin. One could imagine how angry the emperor of the country of Lin was to have sent out such an army. Seeing the spatial spirit boat getting closer and closer, a middle-aged burly man stood at the front of the army with a dignified expression. His eyes were filled with coldness. This man was the commander of this army, an expert of the immortal emperor realm. When he heard that the emperor had mobilized 100,000 soldiers to kill a few foreign warriors, the commander snorted disdainfully. He only thought that it was a waste of talent to kill a chicken with a sledgehammer. Until now, the commander still had the same thought. It's just a few foreign warriors. His Majesty actually mobilized the Tianlin army. He thinks too highly of them. Seeing the spatial spirit boat getting closer and closer, the commander snorted coldly. However, just as he finished speaking, 4 figures jumped out from the spatial spirit boat and instantly appeared in the sky above the Tianlin army. The people who came were none other than Li Ku and the other 3. Shao Chen had already ordered the slaughter of the Tianlin army. Naturally, Li Ku and the other 3 didn't hesitate at all. They didn't speak any nonsense and directly attacked. The 4 Dan En realm experts released their auras at the same time. In an instant, a terrifying aura suddenly descended from the sky. Feeling this terrifying aura, the face of the Tianlin army commander, who was previously arrogant, suddenly changed. They weren't at the Celestial Emperor realm. This group of foreign warriors weren't at the Celestial Emperor realm at all. However, before the commander could speak, the aura instantly increased. In an instant, the 100,000 Tianlin army soldiers were directly crushed. Countless people were directly crushed and turned into a bloody mist. Just the aura alone made the Tianlin army unable to fight back. To an End Realm expert, 100,000 soldiers were like floating clouds. If they couldn't even withstand the aura, how could they pose a threat to an End Realm expert? This was also the reason why in the battle between good and evil in the Great Thousand World, regardless of whether it was the side of the Great Thousand World or the evil path, the participants of the battle were at least at the Immortal Emperor realm. This was because the cultivators below that level weren't even qualified to enter the battlefield. The 100,000 Tianlin army, the strongest army of the Lin country, was completely wiped out in just a dozen breaths of time. Only a few generals were still bitterly holding on. However, such persistence was of no use to Li Ku and the other 3. In front of 4 End Realm experts, the 100,000 Tianlin army soldiers couldn't even withstand a single blow. Before dying, the Tianlin army commander's expression suddenly changed as he muttered, "It's over, Your Majesty. The Lin country is finished." There was definitely a huge mistake in the judgment of the Lin country emperor. This group of foreign warriors weren't at the Celestial Emperor realm at all. They were existences that far surpassed the Celestial Emperor realm. Even if the Lin country still had some trump cards, they were far from enough in front of these people. 100,000 Tianlin army soldiers were almost wiped out in the blink of an eye. This was definitely a disaster for the Lin country. It didn't take much time for Li Ku and the other three to completely wipe out the Tianlin army, including the generals and the commander of the Tianlin army. All of them were dead. Xiao Qin and the others continued to advance towards the imperial capital. At the same time, the news of the Tianlin army being wiped out immediately reached the emperor of the Lin country. In the imperial palace, the emperor of the Lin country was sitting in the main hall. When he heard that the Tianlin army had been wiped out and no one was left alive, his face was blank. He seemed to have lost his soul as he kept muttering to himself. How could this be? How could this be? 100,000 Tianlin army soldiers were wiped out in an instant. How could the emperor of the Lin country not know what this meant? He was wrong. Moreover, he had brought disaster to the Lin country. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 24:30. 100,000 Sky Forest Army soldiers were slaughtered, which made the Emperor of Lin country feel a chill down his spine. Moreover, the most important thing was that all 100,000 Sky Forest Army soldiers were slaughtered in an instant. What did this mean? It meant that the Sky Forest Army of Lin country didn't even have the strength to fight back in front of this group of mysterious foreign warriors. 100,000 Sky Forest Army soldiers were slaughtered, which made the Emperor of Lin country feel a chill down his spine. Moreover, the most important thing was that all 100,000 Sky Forest Army soldiers were slaughtered in an instant. What did this mean? It meant that the Sky Forest Army of Lin country didn't even have the strength to fight back in front of this group of mysterious foreign warriors. However, the Emperor of the Lin country did not know that only Li Ku, Wang Songxue, and the other three had taken action. Xiao Qun and the rest had not taken action yet. If he knew about this, the Emperor of the Lin country's expression would be even more interesting. Even if he did not know about this, the Emperor of the Lin country was already terrified. The strength of this group of foreign cultivators was far beyond his imagination. Immediately, the Emperor of the Lin country did not care about anything else and rushed straight into the depths of the palace. The Lin country had been established for many years, so naturally, it had its own foundation. In the depths of the palace, the Emperor of the Lin country hurriedly pushed open the door and entered. This palace was the residence of the old ancestor of the Lin country's imperial family. Every emperor of the Lin country would abdicate once his cultivation broke through to the immortal emperor realm. Then, he would seclude himself in this palace to cultivate. This was the foundation of the Lin country's imperial family. Under normal circumstances, unless it was a major event that could shake the foundation of the country, the current emperor would not disturb his own old ancestor. However, at this moment, the Emperor of the Lin country could not care less about this. He hurriedly pushed open the door and entered. Then, he knelt on the ground and said, "Old ancestor, please save my life." Along with the Emperor's words, a hoarse voice rang out in the main hall. "What's the matter?" All along, only the Emperor could enter this palace. Others could not even get close to it, let alone enter it. As soon as he finished speaking, 7 young and old men dressed in coarse linen clothes appeared one after another. Among these people, there were both young and old. Without exception, all of their cultivations had surpassed the celestial emperor realm. Among the 7 people, one of them was the current emperor's father. Looking at his son kneeling on the ground, an elegant middle-aged man said, "Ming-er, what is it?" "Father." Looking at his father, the emperor was taken aback. Then, he knelt and pleaded. "My country of Lin is facing a great calamity. I hope that father and patriarchs can lend a hand." Impending disaster? Hearing this, the expressions of the 7 people present darkened. They knew that the emperor would not joke about something like this. Furthermore, unless there was something that could shake the foundation of the country, the emperor would not personally come here. After all, these old ancestors no longer cared about worldly affairs. In fact, very few people in the world knew of their existence. After all, every emperor would announce his death to the outside world when he abdicated. This was because this was the only way for the new emperor to have a better control over the court. Otherwise, a country with two emperors, or even several emperors, would obviously be detrimental to the stability of the country. Therefore, in the eyes of outsiders, these old fellows no longer existed. As such, these old fellows would only take action when it was truly a matter of life and death. Facing the inquiry of the patriarchs, the emperor of the country of Lin did not dare to hide anything. He immediately recounted the matter of the Wanshan city, the western garrison liege lord, and the massacre of 100,000 Sky Forest army. Upon hearing the emperor's words, one of the old men with white hair and beard immediately shouted angrily, "Stupid! As the ruler of a country, how can you be so stupid? You don't even know the strength of the other party, and you dare to give the order to hunt them down?" The matter of the Wanshan city and the western garrison liege lord could not be blamed on the emperor. However, the massacre of 100,000 Sky Forest army was caused by the emperor's stupidity. To be able to slaughter 100,000 Sky Forest army in an instant, one could imagine how powerful the other party's cultivation was. If the emperor had calmed down and figured out the other party's strength, things would not have turned out this way. There might even be room for negotiation. After all, the western garrison liege lord could not represent the entire royal family of the country of Lin. However, the emperor was different. If the emperor did not give the order to hunt them down, then the matter of the Wanshan city would be the western garrison liege lord's own business. At that time, even if the other party came to the imperial capital to demand an explanation, he could still deal with them. However, since the emperor had given the order to hunt them down, it meant that this matter was no longer the western garrison liege lord's own business, but the entire royal family of the country of Lin. It was obvious that the other party was not to be trifled with. His strength had exceeded the emperor's expectations. Therefore, the patriarch could not help but curse. The emperor of the country of Lin did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction after being scolded by his own patriarch. Although he was the emperor, it was only the royal family's facade. Although the affairs of the country of Lin were usually handled by the emperor, it was not difficult to change the emperor if he angered these old men. In a martial artist's strength was always above authority. If one had strength, they would have authority. On the other hand, if one had authority but no strength, it would be like a castle in the air, extremely illusory and could collapse at any time. Therefore, a true powerhouse would never care about the full strength of the secular world. Emperors and princes were nothing in the eyes of a true powerhouse. Even if they did not make a move, it would not take long for them to turn into a pile of yellow soil. After kneeling respectfully in front of the patriarchs and scolding them, another patriarch said, "It's useless to say anything now. Judging from the other party's appearance, they are heading straight for the imperial capital. Let's think about how to deal with them now. Forget it. Since the other party is here, we will come forward. You don't have to worry about this matter." After hearing the patriarch's words, one of them finally spoke. The matter had exceeded the emperor's ability. Hearing the patriarch's words, the emperor breathed a sigh of relief. In the face of such a powerhouse, he could only leave it to the patriarch to deal with. One had to know that people at the level of the patriarch could no longer be resisted by numbers. Therefore, in the face of such a powerhouse, it was still necessary to have a powerhouse of the same level to come forward. However, the emperor of the country of Lin still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. He thought that by asking his patriarch to come forward, he should be able to resolve this matter smoothly. Little did he know that in the eyes of Shao Chun and the others, the patriarchs of the country of Lin's imperial family were not worth mentioning at all. Although the 7 patriarchs of the Lin family were existences whose cultivation had surpassed the immortal emperor realm, they had only reached the enlightenment realm. The strongest one was only a half-step to the Tao realm, and had not truly broken through to the Tao realm. With such cultivation, they were indeed considered godlike existences in the country of Lin. However, in front of Shao Chen and the others, they were still too weak. Until now, the emperor of the country of Lin still did not know what kind of existence he had provoked. Even the patriarchs were the same. They were still holding on to the illusion that as long as they came forward, they should be able to resolve this matter. It was laughable that they did not know how naive their thoughts were. Seeking collection, monthly votes, recommendations. Chapter 2431. The imperial family of the Lin country was still arrogant. Little did they know that their insignificant strength was never in Shao Chen's eyes. Destroying the imperial family of the Lin country was just a piece of cake for Shao Chen and his group. After receiving the reply from his old ancestor, the emperor of the Lin country left in a good mood. In his opinion, with his old ancestor taking action, there was no need to worry about this matter anymore. No matter how strong that group of foreign warriors was, could they be stronger than his old ancestor? The emperor of the Lin country thought that he only needed to wait for his old ancestor to come out and solve this problem. Little did he know that the imperial family of the Lin country was already facing a great disaster. In less than a day, Shao Chen and his group arrived at the imperial capital of the Lin country. For the warriors of the Lin country, the imperial capital was definitely the most prosperous and majestic city. However, for Shao Chen and his group, the imperial capital of the Lin country was nothing special at all. Shao Chen and his group had seen many cities that were more prosperous and majestic than the imperial capital. Therefore, for the imperial capital of the Lin country, Shao Chen and his group didn't feel anything at all. The spatial spirit ship stopped steadily in the sky above the imperial capital. Suddenly, they saw a starship-like spatial spirit ship appear in the sky above the imperial capital. Many warriors of the imperial capital were stunned. One had to know that flying was prohibited in the imperial capital because it was disrespectful to the imperial family. Even if an immortal emperor realm expert came to the imperial capital, they had to enter through the city gate step by step. Many warriors in the imperial capital had the same thought. However, Shao Chen and his group didn't care at all. Standing on the deck and looking at the imperial capital in front of them, Shao Chen said indifferently, "Hurry up." Shao Chen didn't have any intention to destroy the imperial family of the Lin country. Similarly, the monk and Taoist were the same. Hearing Shao Chen's words, Li Ku, Wang Xuesong, and the other End Realm experts nodded respectfully. Then, Wang Xuesong and the other 5 stepped out of the spatial spirit ship and stood proudly in the air. Then, a voice mixed with spiritual energy came out of Wang Xuesong's mouth and instantly spread through the streets and alleys of the imperial capital. Today, the imperial family of the Lin country will be destroyed. Annihilate the royal family of Lin country? Hearing this, many warriors in the imperial capital were stunned. These people were too arrogant. Not only did they swagger into the imperial capital, they even wanted to destroy the imperial family of the Lin kingdom. However, as Wang Xuesong's words rang out, several powerful auras erupted from within the imperial city. Although these auras were powerful in the eyes of the imperial city's cultivators, in the eyes of Wang Xuesong and the rest, they were unable to withstand a single blow. Almost all of them were at the immortal king realm. Such a cultivation base was simply too weak to be any weaker. Then, the ministers and experts of Lin country appeared in front of Wang Xuesong and the others. Their leader was an old man at the immortal emperor realm. He looked coldly at Wang Xuesong and the others and shouted in a deep voice, "Who are you? How dare you speak such arrogant words?" The old man was the current prime minister of Lin country. As the Prime Minister of Lin Country, he naturally couldn't remain indifferent when he heard that someone dared to say that they wanted to destroy the imperial family of Lin Country. Cold light flashed in his eyes and killing intent gathered. However, Wang Xuesong didn't pay any attention to the old man's angry shout. He pointed out a finger and killed the old man on the spot. As an immortal Emperor realm expert, the Prime Minister of Lin Country was killed by Wang Xuesong with a single finger. He didn't even have the chance to react. Seeing such an outcome, all the experts of Lin Country were stunned. How could this be possible? The Prime Minister was at the immortal Emperor realm. How could he be killed so easily? It didn't make sense at all. They didn't expect things to turn out like this. Wang Xuesong ignored the shock of the crowd and spoke again. Why? Are the people of the imperial family all cowards? As he spoke, Wang Xuesong pointed his finger again, but this time, he pointed in the direction of the imperial palace. As he pointed, the sky collapsed and the earth caved in. More than half of the imperial palace was destroyed in an instant, and the other places were also ruined by the aftermath. Wang Xuesong didn't mean anything to these ministers of Lin Country. He didn't want to kill them. The reason he killed the Prime Minister was just to tell them to keep their eyes open. Sure enough, in the face of the current situation, these ministers fell into silence. They no longer had the coldness from before. On the contrary, each and every one of them was terrified. They even subconsciously widened the gap between them and Wang Xuesong. Xiao Chen and the others had arrived at the imperial capital. Wang Xuesong had killed the Prime Minister and destroyed more than half of the imperial palace with a single finger. While everyone was still in shock, the 7 old ancestors of Lin Country finally showed themselves. Looking at the 7 old ancestors of the imperial family in the sky, the experts of Lin Country were stunned. Then they murmured in disbelief, "How is this possible, Your Majesty? Aren't they the previous emperors of Lin Country? Weren't they all rumored to have passed away? How is it that they are all alive and well?" These ministers were all important ministers of Lin Country. However, they still didn't know some of the secrets of the imperial family. After all, they were promoted by the current emperor. As the saying goes, a new emperor brings in new ministers. When a new emperor ascends the throne, he naturally has to promote his trusted subordinate. As the emperors who were supposed to be dead showed up one after another, the ministers were stunned on the spot. It was especially so when they saw the elderly man in the middle. One of them exclaimed as though they had seen a ghost. Emperor Gaozu was the founding emperor of Lin Country. It had been at least several thousand years. How was he still alive? Everyone was shocked, but Wang Xuesong was very calm. Looking at the 7 people in front of him, Wang Xuesong saw through their cultivation base at a glance. They were all in the Enlightenment realm. The strongest among them was only half a step into the Tao realm. Such a cultivation base was indeed not enough. "Is this the foundation of your imperial family?" Wang Xuesong said indifferently as his gaze fell on the old man in the middle. He was Emperor Gaozu of Lin Country, and also the one with the highest cultivation base among the 7, half a step into the Tao realm. 7 Enlightenment realm cultivators. This was the foundation of the imperial family. However, Wang Xuesong's expression was still calm. It was as if these 7 people were nothing in his eyes. Looking at Wang Xuesong's indifferent expression and calm tone, Emperor Gaozu respectfully cupped his hands and bowed. "Senior, this is actually a complete misunderstanding. What happened in the 10,000 Mountain City was all done by Lord Jinshi himself. Senior, I hope that you can understand this. Our royal family is willing to compensate you and will definitely satisfy you. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2432. Before meeting Wang Songxue and the others, the 7 ancestors of the Lin Kingdom's imperial family thought that they could handle this matter. After all, with their cultivation, even if the foreign cultivators were powerful, they should at least give them some face. However, after seeing Wang Songxue kill the prime minister and destroy half of the imperial palace with a finger, the 7 ancestors completely lost their temper. Although they still couldn't see through Wang Songxue's cultivation, as long as they weren't stupid, they could guess that Wang Songxue's strength would definitely crush the 7 of them. For a moment, the 7 ancestors couldn't help but curse the emperor in their hearts. What kind of enemy did he provoke for the Lin kingdom? Did he want to personally destroy the Lin kingdom? The arrogance in their hearts had long disappeared. At this moment, the 7 ancestors were only thinking about how to appease Wang Songxue and settle this matter as soon as possible. In front of Wang Songxue, the 7 ancestors were very clear that the Lin kingdom didn't have the ability to contend with him. For an expert at Wang Songxue's level, if he wanted to destroy the Lin kingdom, it would be too easy. Even the entire Lin kingdom's strength wouldn't be able to stop Wang Songxue and the others. They couldn't even muster the slightest bit of resistance. In the face of the 7 ancestors of the Lin kingdom's humble attitude, Wang Songxue turned his head and glanced at Xiao Chen behind him. However, Xiao Chen didn't say anything about it. Now, he wanted to compensate? How could it be so simple? Moreover, how could Xiao Chen be satisfied with the compensation that Lin Gua had given him? To put it bluntly, even if Xiao Chen searched the entire Lin kingdom's treasury, there probably wouldn't be many things that could catch Xiao Chen's eye. In Xiao Chen's eyes, a small country that was so small that it could not even be laughed at was dreaming if it wanted to write off what had happened before with just a word of compensation. When Wang Xuesong turned his head, the 7 ancestors naturally saw him. Soon, the 7 of them reacted. Wang Xuesong before them wasn't someone who could make the decision. In an instant, the 7 of them respectfully bowed to the spatial spirit ship that Xiao Chen and the others were on. I hope that Senior can be magnanimous. We will definitely not offend Senior's dignity in the future. The people on the spatial spirit boat were the ones who could make the decisions. The 7 patriarchs quickly realized this. Without Xiao Chen's approval, Wang Songxue didn't dare to make a move. Whether the royal family of the Lin kingdom survived or perished depended on Xiao Chen's decision. Xiao Chen looked at the 7 great ancestors indifferently as they saluted him. However, before Xiao Chen could say anything, a spatial crack tore open on the spot without any warning. Then, a terrifying pressure spread out from it. This pressure caused Xiao Chen's heart to palpitate. This was a feeling of dread that came from the bottom of his heart. He couldn't even muster up the slightest intention of resisting. An expert who had surpassed the sovereign realm. The old man was definitely an expert who had surpassed the sovereign realm. At the same time, Tyrant and Taoist sensed the aura and instantly appeared on the deck. Looking at the black hole in front of them, Tyrant and Taoist sneered. These dogs, they even want to care about such a small matter? It wasn't hard to tell from Tyrant and Taoist's words that they knew the identity of the person who had come. At the same time, in order to prevent Xiao Chen and the others from falling into their hands, Tyrant and Taoist blocked Xiao Chen and the others behind them. However, Wang Xuesong and the others weren't so lucky. This pressure was obviously aimed at them. Immediately, Wang Xuesong and the others were sent flying. They all spat out a mouthful of blood. Just his aura alone was able to injure 6 End Realm expert. Was this an existence who had surpassed the sovereign realm? Seeing that Wang Xuesong and the others couldn't even resist the other party's aura, Xiao Chen was shocked. Tyrant and Taoist were existences who had surpassed the sovereign realm. However, the 2 of them had never revealed their aura. This was also the first time Xiao Chen saw how terrifying an expert who had surpassed the sovereign realm and reached the ancestor realm was. Under everyone's gaze, 2 middle-aged men in white robes slowly walked out of the spatial crack. The 2 of them had dignified appearances and gave off an indescribable feeling. Tyrant and Taoist, have you forgotten the agreement? Cloud Palace is not allowed to attack the forces of the Hongmeng world. As soon as the two of them appeared, one of them directly looked at Tyrant and Taoist and said. As for Shao Chun and the others, they were directly ignored by the two of them. A group of ants who hadn't even broken through the sovereign realm didn't know that the two of them were paying attention to them. They didn't know who the two of them were. However, after hearing this, Taoist smiled slightly and said, "Your immortal palace is really nosy. We naturally won't attack for no reason. This Lin country is just seeking its own destruction." The Taoist priest refused to back down. Beside him, the tyrant monk whispered to Shao Chun. "These guys are from Immortal Palace. All of them are overflowing with Taoist appearances. There's no need for you to get involved. Just leave it to us." Shao Chun naturally didn't know much about Immortal Palace. However, one thing was enough to prove Immortal Palace's strength. Immortal Palace was a sect founded by the World Master of the Hongmeng world. It was fully deserving of its title as the Overlord of the Hongmeng world. Even the Tenzu of the Hongmeng world didn't dare to disobey Immortal Palace. Cloud Palace was a sect founded by the World Master of the Hongmeng world. It was in existence on the same level as Immortal Palace. Therefore, Immortal Palace paid special attention to Cloud Palace when they came to the Hongmeng world this time. However, Cloud Palace claimed that they came to the Hongmeng world for a friendly exchange and didn't have any hostility towards the Hongmeng world. Moreover, Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace were equal in strength. Under the premise that there was no irreconcilable conflict, it was obvious that they wouldn't casually start a war. Therefore, Immortal Palace played the role of a host and warmly received Cloud Palace's people. However, Cloud Palace was the overlord of a universe after all. There were many experts in it, not to mention the higher-ups of Cloud Palace like Tyrant and Taoist. Therefore, even though Immortal Palace warmly received Cloud Palace, they had an agreement that Cloud Palace's people couldn't attack any of the Hongmeng world's forces for no reason. At the same time, Immortal Palace arranged people to keep an eye on Ancestor Realm experts like Tyrant and Taoist just in case. Of course, the person monitoring them was also an Ancestor Realm expert. There was no need to mention the strength of an Ancestor Realm expert. If an Ancestor Realm expert went crazy, it would definitely be the end of the world. Originally, this Immortal Palace expert had been secretly monitoring Tyrant and Taoist. However, he had no choice but to show himself now. Hearing Taoist's words, the person who spoke earlier snorted and said, "Humph, Taoist, don't forget where you are. This is the Hongmeng world, not the Hongmeng world's Hongmeng world. Don't forget the agreement from before and don't think that Hongmeng world is easy to bully. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 2433. Immortal Palace's experts were already hostile and fearful of Cloud Palace's arrival. After all, two tigers couldn't share one mountain. As the overlord-level forces of two universes, the result of a collision was obvious. It was already good enough that they didn't fight. Immortal Palace's experts were already hostile and fearful of Cloud Palace's arrival. After all, two tigers couldn't share one mountain. As the overlord-level forces of two universes, the result of a collision was obvious. It was already good enough that they didn't fight. Therefore, the relationship between Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace's experts couldn't be considered harmonious. It could even be said that both sides were opposing each other. Hearing the words of the Immortal Palace's expert, the Taoist priest sneered, while the monk beside him said, "You Immortal Palace's people talk too much nonsense. If you want to fight, then fight. Why are you wasting words here?" The monk also looked down on these Immortal Palace's expert. Hearing this, the faces of the two Immortal Palace's experts sank. Then, a power that surpassed the Emperor realm erupted from their bodies. The strongest existences in the Great Thousand World were Emperor realm experts. However, in the Hong Meng world and the outside world, they were nothing, because above the Emperor realm, there were Ancestor realm experts, and above the Ancestor realm experts, there were world lords that ruled over everything. The two Immortal Palace's experts didn't hesitate and directly chose to attack. The monk and Taoist priest didn't show any weakness and immediately retaliated. In fact, if it weren't for the suppression of the world lords, the Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace's experts would have already fought. After all, the relationship between both sides was like this, so there was nothing strange about it. The four Ancestor realm experts fought fiercely. Xiao Chun and the others couldn't interfere at all. Not to mention Xiao Chun, even if Jun Wuya and Xie Tian were here, they could only watch obediently from the side. Compared to the Hong Meng world and the outside world, the development of the martial Tao in the Great Thousand World was indeed far behind. This was something that couldn't be denied. The four Ancestor experts were locked in a fierce battle. Behind Monk Jiuro, there was an illusory image of Buddha that appeared solemn and dignified. This monk Jiuro had cultivated the Buddhist sect's cultivation technique to perfection, and it was as if a true Buddha had descended. The Taoist priest wasn't to be outdone. His aura was terrifying to the extreme. When he stretched his hand, the phantom of the three pure Taoist masters appeared. They did not hold back at all. The four of them attacked with all their might, and the surrounding space had already been sealed by the four of them. Otherwise, with the strength of the four of them, just a little bit of aftershock would have been enough to destroy the entire capital of the Lin country. Immortal Palace. The Immortal Palace, and the other forces didn't have Ancestor realm experts. The Immortal Palace S's. Immortal Emperor. The battle before them had completely exceeded the range of what the people of the Lin Kingdom could accept. Even the 7 old ancestors of the Lin Kingdom's royal family were in a daze. They had never imagined that there would be such an expert in this world. This was an existence that could shatter the galaxy. Although they couldn't feel the slightest bit of aura leaking out and couldn't even catch a glimpse of the monk, Taoist priest, and the other 3, everyone was still nervous and shocked. The palpitations that came from the bottom of their hearts were palpitating. This was a true battle between two powerful beings. Within the sealed space, the entire space had already collapsed completely. All sorts of laws and powerful mystic skills were unleashed one after another. Countless abnormal phenomena were intertwined, as though it was the end of the world. With the Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace's level, there was no way for them to come into contact with forces like Immortal Palace and Cloud Palace, let alone Ancestor realm experts. Therefore, it was the first time for everyone present to see what a real expert was. What was the pinnacle of the martial Tao? Facing an Ancestor realm expert, no one had any other thoughts. There was only deep reverence. However, there was one exception, and that was Xiao Chun. Looking at the 4 people in the fierce battle, Xiao Chen's eyes were filled with nervousness, but there was also a strong fighting spirit. This time, coming to the primordial world through the mysterious black hole could be said to have completely opened the door to a new world for Xiao Chun. It let Xiao Chun know what it meant to say that there was always someone better than him. Especially after getting to know the monk and Taoist priest, Xiao Chun knew how terrifying an Ancestor realm expert was. If an Ancestor realm expert entered the Great Thousand World, the entire Great Thousand World would not be able to do anything. An Ancestor realm expert was enough to make the entire Great Thousand World helpless. With the strength of one person, he could suppress all living beings in a world. Not to mention, there was an even more powerful world lord above the Ancestor realm expert. That was the true ruler of a universe. Xiao Chun knew that with his current strength, he was still very far from the progenitor realm, let alone the lord of a world. However, from the bottom of his heart, Xiao Chun was confident that one day, he would eventually reach this level. Moreover, after seeing the world outside the Great Thousand World and learning about the universe, Xiao Chen also had a vague goal in his heart, which was to become the world lord of the Great Thousand World. Compared to the Hong Meng world and the Great World, the vast Thousand World was now like a group of heroes fighting for supremacy. Although there was a saying that there were 10 great Ling Tian sects, no force could unify the vast Thousand World, and no one could make the heavenly ancestors submit to them. However, the primordial world and the Great World were different. Even though these two universes were also flourishing, there was still a mountain that was impossible to cross in front of all the powers. It was the Immortal Palace and the Cloud Palace. To the primordial world and the Great Thousand World, these two great forces were the kings that dominated everything. The Great Thousand World just happened to lack such a king. The king set the order, looked down on the common people, and dominated everything. At the same time, he also became the protector of the universe. The Great Thousand World did not have such a king, and similarly, the Great Thousand World did not have a protector. If the battle between good and evil broke out in the primordial world and the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chen could imagine that the evil side would not be able to stir up a single wave. Although Xiao Chen had not been to the Immortal Palace and the Cloud Palace, based on what he knew, these two great forces could definitely easily suppress the evil warriors in the Great Thousand World. A hazy feeling appeared in his heart. Xiao Chen also wanted to create a force like the Cloud Palace and the Immortal Palace, to dominate and protect everything. His eyes were burning. Xianyuan Ling, who was beside him, seemed to have sensed the change in Xiao Chen and smiled. "Third brother, it seems that you have found a new target?" Xianyuan Ling could guess what Xiao Chen was thinking. In this regard, Xiao Chen did not respond, but he did not deny it either. He had indeed found a new target, but there was still a long way to go. With the current him, not to mention the masters of the Immortal Palace and the Cloud Palace, even the monk, the Taoist priest, and Xiao Chen were far inferior. However, Xiao Chen believed that one day, he would definitely be on equal footing with the two masters of the Cloud Palace and the Immortal Palace. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2434. After realizing how powerful Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace were, Xiao Chen had a grand ambition. One day, Xiao Chen would also become an existence like Cloud Palace's master. After realizing how powerful Cloud Palace and Immortal Palace were, Xiao Chen also had a grand ambition. One day, Xiao Chen would also become an existence like Cloud Palace's master. However, these were all things for the future. Right now, Xiao Chen was still quite a distance away from the monk and Taoist, let alone Cloud Palace's master. Putting everything else aside, Xiao Chen didn't even have the qualifications to interfere in the battle between the monk, Taoist, and Immortal Palace's master. If Xiao Chen wanted to be on equal footing with Cloud Palace's master, he still had a long way to go. Xiao Chen calmly watched the battle. Just as the monk said, the moment Immortal Palace's expert appeared, Xiao Chen could no longer resolve the situation. The battle had already reached its climax. In the midst of the battle, an expert from Immortal Palace sneered at the monk. "Monk, I've long heard that your Cloud Palace's 9 palaces have 9 great palace masters. As one of the 9 great palace masters, your strength is a bit lacking." "Haha, this poor monk's strength is insignificant to begin with. But even so, you still can't do anything to this poor monk, can you?" The monk didn't seem to mind the mockery of the expert from Immortal Palace. He put on a mocking expression. Cloud Palace was divided into 9 palaces above the clouds, and each palace had a palace master. It was said that the palace masters of the 9 palaces above the clouds were all ancestor realm experts. They were the 9 great pillars of the 9 palaces above the Cloud Palace's master. This little bit of provocation was naturally useless against the monk. After living for so many years, if he didn't even have this bit of shrewdness, then he might as well just bang his head against the wall and die. As soon as he finished speaking, the monk struck out with a palm. The Buddha's projection was like a giant that pressed down with a palm. Amitabha! The chanting of sutras filled the air. The expert from Immortal Palace didn't dare to be careless in the slightest in this battle with the monk. He could clearly sense a terrifying pressure pressing down on him from the palm. This monk had indeed cultivated the Buddhist techniques to the acme of perfection. This palm strike of his was filled with boundless Buddhist powers. Looking at the monk's palm strike, Xiao Chen did not know how to evaluate it. It was not that there were no Buddhist experts in the Great Thousand World, and Xiao Chen had come into contact with many cultivators who practiced Buddhist cultivation method. However, compared to the monk, the powerhouses in the Great Thousand World who practiced Buddhist cultivation techniques were simply too weak. They could not be compared at all. Buddhist skills were benevolent and merciful, delivering all living beings from torment and righteousness. All of these were fully manifested on Tyrant's body. At this moment, Tyrant was truly like a living Buddha. His golden radiance was so blinding that it was hard to look at him directly. When the monk struck out with his palm, the expert from Immortal Palace was not to be outdone. Dense black light erupted from behind him. Then, he struck out with a fist. Dense ghost energy frantically spread out. The black fist and the golden palm collided fiercely. It was like the collision of light and darkness. For a moment, neither side could do anything to the other. It was a confrontation between light and evil. At the same time, the expert from Immortal Palace shouted angrily, "Monk, let me experience your Mahavairakana Sutra today." Although the experts from the Sword sect had not been in the primordial world for a long time, it was not a short time either. Therefore, the expert from Immortal Palace had some understanding of Tyrant. He knew that Tyrant cultivated the Mahavairakana Sutra, one of the top Buddhist techniques in the Great Thousand World. When Tyrant first appeared in the primordial world, all the Buddhist sects in the primordial world were shaken. Even the most powerful Buddhist sect, the Heavenly Thunder Temple, personally invited Tyrant to the Heavenly Thunder Temple. He had wanted to fight Tyrant for a long time. Today was the best opportunity. As he spoke, the black light behind the expert from Immortal Palace erupted again. His aura also continuously rose. Tyrant was not to be outdone. The sound of Buddhist scriptures in the world increased again. At the same time, the Buddha's shadow behind him also became more and more powerful. Who would have thought that a fat monk who didn't seem to have any outstanding features would have such strength? Seeing Tyrant and the expert from Immortal Palace collide, Li Ku and the others did not dare to associate Tyrant with Wanshan City's flowery monk. One had to know that in Wanshan City, Tyrant was the one who hugged beauties. He looked like a monk who drank meat and drank wine. It was hard to imagine that such a monk could cultivate Buddhist techniques to such a level. However, Tyrant clearly did not know what Li Ku and the others were thinking. Even if he knew, with Tyrant's personality, he would probably say something like, "Wine and meat pass through the intestines, Buddha stays in the heart. If I don't enter hell, who will?" It was too terrifying. This kind of battle was unforgettable for everyone present. At this moment, the golden light around Tyrant seemed to have become a second sun between heaven and earth, illuminating all things. There was still no clear victor. Tyrant and the expert from Immortal Palace were both progenitor realm experts. Their strength was on par with each other. It would not be easy to determine the victor. However, at this moment, without any warning, a cyan light appeared out of nowhere. The entire sky was directly split by this sword. It was as if the sky was split into two and completely split apart. The sky is splitting apart. Such a peerless sword strike made even a sword cultivator like Li Ku gasp in amazement. There was actually someone in this world who could slash out such a sword strike? The cyan light slowed down and fiercely struck between the golden palm and the black fist. Tyrant and Immortal Palace's experts, who were originally on par with each other, immediately stopped fighting when this sword strike appeared. Then, a young man wearing a long robe embroidered with white clouds appeared on the battlefield. The man was very ordinary, and there was nothing special about him. He only held an extremely ordinary sword in his hand, which also did not have anything special about it. However, with the appearance of the young man, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with a strange glint. Xiao Chen did not deny that Tyrant was very strong. However, in any case, the path that Tyrant walked was different from Xiao Chen's. However, this young man was different. Like Xiao Chen, he was also a sword cultivator. Moreover, judging from the sword strike just now, Xiao Chen had to admit that this young man's strength was far above his own. Even his comprehension of the sword Tao was far above his. Putting aside the cultivation, this was the first time Xiao Chen met someone whose comprehension of the sword Tao was higher than his. At this moment, the young man stood there like a sharp jian that had yet to be unsheathed. His entire body was like a sword. Xiao Chen looked at the young man with a strange expression. At this time, Tyrant also said to the young man in a bad mood, "Qin Feng, are you crazy? You want to cut down your own people?" Clearly, Tyrant was very dissatisfied with Qin Feng's sudden attack. If he had not stopped in time, Qin Feng's sword strike would have landed on Tyrant and that expert from Immortal Palace. Begging collection, begging monthly votes, begging recommendation. Chapter 2435. Monk grumbled unhappily. Qin Feng didn't care about that at all. He was the same as Monk, one of the 9 palace masters of the 9 palaces above the clouds. He was also an ancestor expert. Moreover, Qin Feng was in charge of the sword palace within the 9 palaces above the clouds. Monk grumbled unhappily. Qin Feng didn't care about that at all. He was the same as Monk, one of the 9 palace masters of the 9 palaces above the clouds. He was also an ancestor expert. Moreover, Qin Feng was in charge of the sword palace within the 9 palaces above the clouds. Not caring about Monk's curses at all, Qin Feng directly locked his gaze onto the 2 Immortal Palace experts. With an extremely indifferent expression, he said, "Both of you stop." Do we have to stop just because you say so?" Hearing that, one of them coldly snorted. It was true that Qin Feng's strength wasn't weak, and could even be said to be very strong. His sword Tao was simply omnipresent. However, so what? Qin Feng was also an ancestor expert like them. The 2 of them naturally wouldn't listen to Qin Feng. Facing the cold snort from the Immortal Palace expert, Qin Feng didn't care at all. He slightly shook his head and said, "This is the order of your Immortal Palace's palace master. It's up to you whether you want to listen or not." After speaking, he didn't want to pay attention to the 2 of them anymore. As for the 2 who originally wanted to berate Qin Feng, when they heard that it was an order from their palace master, they immediately stopped. They could look down on Qin Feng, but they didn't dare to disobey their palace master. They could only coldly snort to express the dissatisfaction in their hearts. Seeing that, Monk on the side laughed in schadenfreude. "Haha, you 2 cowards! Why are you scared? If you have the ability, then come and fight your Grandpa Buddha for another 300 rounds. Monk didn't hide his ridicule at all. Towards that, the 2 Immortal Palace experts were furious. However, they forcefully endured their anger and didn't attack again. Seeing that, Monk smiled even more brightly. However, just as Monk was rejoicing in their misfortune, Qin Feng continued, "Palace Master wants the 2 of you to return. He even said that you shouldn't disgrace yourself outside." Qin Feng's words caused Monk's smile to immediately stiffen. Then, he fiercely glared at Qin Feng. His appearance was clearly saying, "You brat, you really don't know how to speak." But since Qin Feng said so, Tyrant naturally couldn't attack anymore. It was just that the matter wasn't settled yet. Although he couldn't attack anymore, Tyrant still looked at the 7 old ancestors of Lin country and said, "Your country of Lin has provoked me time and time again. Shouldn't you give me an explanation? Tyrant didn't care about Lin Country's repeated provocations. However, he would definitely demand an explanation from the royal family of Lin Country. Hearing Tyrant's words, the 7 old ancestors of Lin Country were stunned. Then, their faces turned extremely ugly. They already knew that those two were Immortal Palace's experts. Immortal Palace was the overlord of the entire primordial world. Compared to Immortal Palace, Lingua couldn't even be counted as a strand of leg hair. Meanwhile, the monk and the others didn't even fear Immortal Palace, let alone their country of Lin. A power that even Immortal Palace attached great importance to, how could their country of Lin compare? By now, the 7 old masters finally understood what kind of trouble the Emperor of the Lin Country had caused for the Lin Country. It was practically on the brink of destruction. In the eyes of experts at Tyrant's level, a small country of Lin was as weak as an ant. If they wanted to destroy it, it was just a matter of a word. Give an explanation? Hearing Tyrant's words, the 7 old ancestors didn't know what to do. What kind of explanation could the country of Lin give? Or rather, what did the country of Lin have that could catch their eyes? The 7 of them stood rooted to the ground nervously. For a moment, they didn't know what to do. Seeing this, Tyrant said snappily, "Forget it. Let the Emperor of Lin Country take his own life. It's useless to keep such an idiot alive." It could be said that Tyrant was being magnanimous. He didn't vent his anger on the royal family of Lin Country and only let the Emperor take his own life. This kind of punishment was already enough for the royal family of Lin Country. Although as the Emperor, taking his own life was indeed shameful, what else could he do? Even if the other party destroyed the entire country of Lin, he wouldn't have the slightest bit of temper, let alone letting the Emperor take his own life. Hearing Tyrant's words, the 7 old ancestors' hearts sank. However, they still cupped their hands respectfully and said, "Junior understands." After settling the matter of the country of Lin, Tyrant and Taoist once again came before Xiaoqun. At this time, Tyrant also introduced him to Qin Feng enthusiastically. "Qin Feng, this is Brother Xiaoqun. He's a pretty good person. Where did he come from?" "Brother Xiaoqun, what world did you come from?" "The Great Thousand World." "Oh, right. Look at my memory. The Great Thousand World. I plan to bring them to see the Palace Master. I can also talk to that old thing from Immortal Palace to see if he can open the black hole and let them return first. Brother Xiaoqun seems to have something to do in the Great Thousand World." Tyrant introduced everyone to each other. Of course, Tyrant also introduced Qin Feng to Xiaoqun and the others. After hearing Tyrant's words, Qin Feng also looked at Xiaoqun curiously. The Great Thousand World? Is it a small world? He had never heard of this place, but if it was just a small world, Qin Feng wasn't that interested. In this regard, before Xiaoqun could reply, Tyrant spoke first. "Look at your uncultured face. How can it be a small world? Let me tell you, the small world that Brother Xiaoqun and the others are in is a genuine universe. It's the same as our great world and the primordial world." A universe? Upon hearing this, Qin Feng's interest was immediately piqued. They were already invincible in the great world, which was why they followed their palace master to the primordial world. They were a group of people who couldn't stand loneliness. Now that they heard about a new universe, Qin Feng was naturally interested. He looked at Xiaoqun with a hint of anticipation and said, "Oh, I wonder if there is a world lord in the Great Thousand World now. Who is the strongest force? If you have time, you can talk to the palace master and head to the Great Thousand World to take a look." The Cloud Palace didn't have any intention of invading other universes because the higher-ups of the Cloud Palace were all people who couldn't stand loneliness. After staying in the Great World for a long time, it was inevitable that they would feel bored. To put it bluntly, they came out to have fun. The only difference was that the people of the Cloud Palace traveled the Great Thousand World, while the people of the Cloud Palace traveled the Great Thousand World. To put it bluntly, the people of the Cloud Palace traveling the Great Thousand World were like ordinary people traveling to and from major cities. After all, the height one stood at was different and the world one saw was different. The people of the Cloud Palace saw the Great Thousand World, while ordinary people only saw cities. Seeing that Qin Feng had developed a strong interest in the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chen didn't know what to say. After all, the Great Thousand World couldn't be compared to the Primordial World and the Great Thousand World. However, before Xiao Chen could speak, Tyrant interrupted him. Okay, we'll talk about these things later. Let's go and see the Palace Master. Brother Xiao Chen, come with us. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2436. Previously, Tyrant had told Xiao Chen that if he wanted to return to the Great Thousand World, he would need the approval of the Master of the World of Hongmeng. Otherwise, Xiao Chen and the others would not be able to return to the Great Thousand World through the spatial black hole. Previously, Tyrant had told Xiao Chen that if he wanted to return to the Great Thousand World, he would need the approval of the Master of the World of Hongmeng. Otherwise, Xiao Chen and the others would not be able to return to the Great Thousand World through the spatial black hole. However, with Xiao Chen's strength, not to mention obtaining the approval of the Master of the World of Hongmeng, he would not even be able to meet him. After all, Xiao Chen was only a half-step sovereign master. With such cultivation, he naturally would not be able to meet the Master of the World. However, Tyrant could help Xiao Chen. Let the Palace Master of the Cloud Palace talk to him. Both sides were world masters. The Master of the World of Hongmeng should not refuse such a small matter. Hearing Tyrant's words, Xiao Chen did not say much. Immediately, the group left to meet the Palace Master of the Cloud Palace. As for the country of Lin, Tyrant did not care at all. Although the Emperor of the country of Lin had not committed suicide, Tyrant was not worried that the country of Lin would dare to play any tricks. After all, the 7 ancestors of the country of Lin knew what was more important. Either let the current emperor commit suicide, or the entire royal family of the country of Lin would be destroyed. Even an idiot would know what to choose between these two outcomes. Of course, Tyrant was not worried that the 7 ancestors of the royal family of Lin would deceive him because they could give it a try. He believed that the royal family of Lin country would not be so stupid. After Xiao Chen and his group left, the 7 old ancestors of the imperial family of the Lin country looked at the 2 experts from the Immortal Palace anxiously. However, the 2 experts from the Immortal Palace did not seem to care about the gazes of the 7 old ancestors of the Lin country. One of them even snorted. "Humph, a bunch of idiots." After saying that, the 2 Immortal Palace experts disappeared on the spot. A small country of Lin actually dared to provoke the 9 Palace Masters of the Cloud Palace. Wasn't this courting death? Not directly destroying the country of Lin was already considered polite. Now that Tyrant only wanted the Emperor of Lin to commit suicide, Immortal Palace naturally would not interfere with such a small matter. Immortal Palace experts of Lin country left. The 7 ancestors of Lin country looked at each other, but soon they sighed and flew to the palace. The palace experts of Lin country of Lin country of Lin country of Lin country, Lin country of Lin. The royal family of the Lin kingdom did not dare to have the slightest intention of deceiving them. They also knew that in front of an expert at the monk's level, those useless tricks were meaningless. World. And the world to world of world to the world to be. Worlds world. Was world to be. World to world. World did not to world. World. But after Immortal Palace's palace master became the master of the world of Primordial World, he merged countless small worlds together and formed a new world of Primordial World. The world of Primordial World was even more vast than the Great Thousand World. According to Xiao Chen's estimation, there were at least 20 Great Thousand Worlds. Of course, this was not counting the Great Thousand Worlds. In the world of Primordial World, there were a total of 108 main continents. These main continents were incomparably vast. Apart from these 108 main continents, there were countless other small continents. They arrived at a huge territory called the World of Primordial World. This was the center of the World of Primordial World, and also the place where Immortal Palace was located. Standing on the deck and looking from afar, it wasn't difficult to see that the entire world of Primordial World was enveloped by a huge array. This wasn't an offensive array or a defensive array because Immortal Palace didn't need these things. With Immortal Palace's ruling power, there wasn't a single force in the world of Primordial World that dared to offend Immortal Palace. Therefore, Immortal Palace didn't need any offensive or defensive array to protect the world of Primordial World. Just the two words Immortal Palace alone was enough to intimidate all thieves and thieves. This array that enveloped the entire world of Primordial World was a pure spirit-gathering array. However, its grade was so high that even the two vice-masters of the Talisman Gate were shocked. Xiao Chun didn't know much about Talisman Dao, but the two vice-masters of the Talisman Gate were very knowledgeable. Looking at the spirit-gathering array that enveloped the entire world of Primordial World, the two vice-masters of the Talisman Gate exclaimed in shock. This is a spirit-gathering array that surpasses the immortal grade. That's right, this array has reached the ancestor grade. Monk said with a smile. A spirit-gathering array that surpassed the immortal grade was so huge that it enveloped the entire world of Primordial World. It was hard to imagine how rich the world of Primordial World was with such a spirit-gathering array. Under the guidance of Tyrant, Taoist Priest, Qin Feng, and the rest, the group entered the Hong Meng continent without a hitch. However, after passing through the spirit-gathering array, Xiao Chen and the rest felt as though they had entered another world. The entire Hong Meng continent's spiritual energy was so dense that it had turned into mist. The air was filled with tiny droplets of spiritual energy, and the entire Hong Meng continent gave people a warm and gentle feeling. The density of the spiritual energy here was no weaker than the cultivation mystic realms in the top 10 Ling Tian sects. The spirit energy of the entire continent had already surpassed the cultivation mystic realms of the 10 great Ling Tian sects. One could imagine how big the gap was between the boundless world and the primordial world. This was the gap between the foundation of both sides. Xiao Chun and the others were shocked, but Tyrant and Taoist Priest remained calm. After all, even though the spiritual energy in the Hong Meng continent was pretty good, the same couldn't be said for the outside world. When they arrived at the center of the Hong Meng world, they saw countless pavilions and pavilions. This was where the Immortal Palace was located. It was indeed a paradise on earth. Beside the Immortal Palace, there was a huge palace floating in the air. Tyrant, Taoist Priest, and the rest brought Xiao Chen to this palace. This palace could be seen as a huge starship. However, compared to a starship, this palace was definitely of a much higher grade. This was the temporary residence of the Cloud Palace's members. Ever since they set off from the boundless world, they had been living in this palace. The spatial spirit boat slowly descended. Qin Feng didn't say anything and left immediately. Compared to Tyrant and Taoist Priest, Qin Feng was extremely cold. Tyrant, on the other hand, personally arranged accommodation for Xiao Chen and the rest. He then smiled at Xiao Chen. "Brother Xiao Chen, please wait for a moment. I will go and see the palace master first. I will send someone to inform you when the time comes." Even with Tyrant's recommendation, Xiao Chen obviously couldn't meet the palace master of the Cloud Palace casually. At the very least, Tyrant had to explain things to him first. In response, Xiao Chen just smiled and nodded. He didn't say anything else. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 2437. Xiao Chun and the others wanted to go back on the Great Thousand World. This was not a big problem for Tyrant as long as his palace master and the immortal palace master talked about it. Xiao Chun and the others wanted to go back on the Great Thousand World. This was not a big problem for Tyrant as long as his palace master and the immortal palace master talked about it. There were some things that were difficult to do when the two sides were not on the same level. However, once the two sides were on the same level, it would be very simple. For example, if Xiao Chen were to deal with this matter by himself, he might not even be able to meet the immortal palace master, let alone get him to agree. However, if the palace master of the Cloud Palace was to talk about it, it would be completely different. Because the palace master of the Cloud Palace and the immortal palace master were on the same level, since the palace master had spoken, and this was not a difficult matter for the immortal palace master, it was naturally impossible for him to refuse. The monk went to meet the palace lord of the Cloud Palace, while Xiao Chen and the others rested in the cave that the monk had arranged for them. The palace of the Cloud Palace was indeed extraordinary, and the spiritual qi was so abundant that it was astonishing. However, for Xiao Chen, who had been to the World Energy Spring in the Great Thousand World, this was nothing. However, it was different for Long Qing, Xian Yuanling, and the others. They had never seen such abundant world energy before, so they could not help but cultivate. It was definitely a good thing to be able to cultivate here. Everyone was busy cultivating. At night, Xiao Chen felt a little complicated. This time, he came to the Hongmeng world by chance, and it was indeed an eye-opener for Xiao Chen. At the same time, there was an indescribable feeling rising in Xiao Chen's heart. There really is a mountain beyond a mountain, and a person beyond a person. Xiao Chen sighed softly. He felt that the people in the Great Thousand World were indeed frogs at the bottom of a well. However, this could not be blamed on anyone. After all, no one was born with a high vision. Sometimes, one had to experience some things to understand how big the world was. Just like this time, if Xiao Chen did not come to the Hongmeng world by accident, would he know the situation outside the Great Thousand World? Would he know that there were Ancestor Realm Masters above the Emperor Realm? Would he know that there were World Masters in every universe? It was because he saw the vastness of the world with his own eyes that there were so many masters outside of the Great Thousand World that Xiao Chen had such a deep thought. The situation before was still too small. Look at the primordial world and the great world. They had already passed the matter of internal strife long ago. Their eyes were already on the other universes. Of course, Xiao Chen also knew the rules. Xiao Chen did not violate any taboos of the rules to Xiao Chen. Obviously, everyone knew who Xiao Chen was. He seemed to be someone from another universe who was brought back by the monk and the Taoist priest. They were also very curious about Xiao Chen. He was a cultivator from another universe. They were curious about everything in the Immortal Palace world. Now, there was someone from another universe. Naturally, the Immortal Palace world disciples could not help but want to see how different Xiao Chen was from them. Along the way, Xiao Chen felt the gazes of the Immortal Palace world disciples on him. Similarly, he also secretly sensed these Immortal Palace world disciples. The number of disciples who could follow the Immortal Palace to the Immortal Palace world was not much. There were 10 million of them. But they were all elite disciples of the Immortal Palace. As the master of the Great Thousand World, the Immortal Palace world had more than 1 million disciples. Among these 10 to 20,000 disciples, not a single one of them was lower than the comprehension realm. There were even many end realm disciples. It was not difficult to see how powerful the immortal palace world was just from the disciples. One must know that the 10 sword maniacs of the sword sect, namely Qin Kunlun and the others, were only in the Tao realm. Moreover, they had just broken through not long ago. With such cultivation, they were already the strongest disciples in the sword sect. But in the immortal palace, they were ordinary. There was nothing special about them. The immortal palace world disciples looked at Shao Chen curiously. However, no one came to disturb Shao Chen. At most, they just looked at him curiously. Unknowingly, Shao Chen did not know where he was. After all, it was his first time in the immortal palace. It seemed like he had come to the entrance of a small world. No one stopped. After looking around, Shao Chen also stepped into the small world curiously. The small world was not big. However, it had green mountains and clear waters. The scenery was picturesque. Looking around, it was indeed a place that did not belong to him. He strolled around. This place was not bad. However, Shao Chen soon came to the bottom of a waterfall. The water of the waterfall gave off a loud roar. Below it was a lake. However, at this moment, there was a young man in gray who was practicing his sword skills on the lake. The young man stood on the lake and waved the long sword in his hand. At times, it was light and agile. At other times, it was domineering and fierce. Shao Chen had seen this young man before. It was Qin Feng, who had returned with him in the day. He seemed to be one of the 9 palace masters of the immortal palace, just like the monk and the Taoist. When he was in the Lin country, Qin Feng's sword had left a deep impression on Shao Chen. He did not expect to see it again. Looking at the figure of Qin Feng practicing his sword skills, Shao Chen unknowingly fell into a trance. Shao Chen could be said to be standing at the peak of the Great Thousand World in terms of sword skills comprehension. Even the experts of the older generation didn't dare to say that they could defeat Shao Chen in terms of sword skills. Therefore, in the Great Thousand World, Shao Chen felt lonely at the top because no one could discuss and exchange sword skills with him. Unfortunately, Jun Wuya wasn't an expert in sword skills either. However, looking at Qin Feng before him, Shao Chen felt enlightened. It turned out that the way of sword skills could also be like this. He had to admit that Qin Feng's comprehension of the sword Dao was clearly much deeper than his. Although the sword technique that Qin Feng was brandishing wasn't a superb sword technique, there was no doubt that Qin Feng's understanding had been added into it. In the hands of Qin Feng, such an ordinary sword skill actually gave off a completely different feeling. It was as though there was an additional soul that filled the entire set of sword skills with spirituality. Shao Chen was in a trance. He was definitely interested in sword skills. Now that he saw someone who could actually comprehend sword skills to such a level, Shao Chen couldn't help but fall into a trance. All that was left in his eyes was the image of Qin Feng practicing his sword skills. Seeking collection, monthly votes, recommendations. Chapter 2438. Shao Chen was in a daze. After all, Qin Feng's swordsmanship was the strongest he had ever seen. He thought that his understanding of swordsmanship was close to the peak, but compared to Qin Feng, there was still a big gap. While Shao Chen was in a daze, Qin Feng, who was practicing his swordsmanship, stabbed his sword toward Shao Chen without any warning. Qin Feng did not use any cultivation in this attack. He only used a pure swordsmanship attack. Seeing that Qin Feng's sword was piercing toward him like the peak of a mountain, Shao Chen instinctively moved his mind. The dustless sword instantly appeared in his hand and collided with Qin Feng's long sword. The tip of the 2 long swords collided fiercely. At the same time, neither of them used any spiritual power. After the collision, Qin Feng did not choose to stop. Instead, he stabbed his sword again. Seeing this, Shao Chen did not show any weakness and also counterattacked. At the lakeside, Shao Chen and Qin Feng were locked in a fierce battle. Of course, both of them were purely competing with swordsmanship. However, as time passed, Xiao Chen gradually fell into a disadvantageous position when it came to swordsmanship. Compared to Qin Feng, Xiao Chen's understanding of swordsmanship was indeed a little lacking. This was undeniable. Even if they did not use their cultivation, Qin Feng could still rely on his own understanding of swordsmanship to gradually gain the upper hand. However, even if he was at a disadvantage, Xiao Chen still benefited a lot. Originally, in the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chen's swordsmanship could be said to have reached a plateau. After all, as a swordsman, Xiao Chen could be considered to be at the top of the Great Thousand World. No one could surpass him in terms of pure understanding of swordsmanship, including those sovereigns. Because there was no opponent in the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chen's swordsmanship had improved very slowly in recent years. This was something that could not be helped. When anything reached a peak, it would become extremely difficult to improve and break through again. After all, it was too difficult to surpass the peak. However, now, Qin Feng's appearance was like telling Xiao Chen that his swordsmanship was far from reaching the peak. In addition, with a sword master like Qin Feng, Xiao Chen could clearly feel that his swordsmanship was improving rapidly. This was like many things that one thought were perfect suddenly became not so perfect. There were mistakes and loopholes, because only in this way would there be room for improvement. However, if one thought that something was perfect and there were no loopholes, it would be the most difficult to improve it. Just like Xiao Chen before, he was unable to find any major mistakes in his own swordsmanship. Under such circumstances, it would be very difficult for Xiao Chen to improve his swordsmanship. It could even be said that it was impossible for him to do so. However, now, as he fought with Qin Feng, Xiao Chen found that, or rather, Qin Feng pointed out many loopholes in Xiao Chen's swordsmanship. Originally, it should have been perfect, but under Qin Feng's sword, there were loopholes. As a result, Xiao Chen naturally had the most intuitive feeling. He sighed in his heart, "It turns out that my swordsmanship still has so many loopholes." The battle did not last long. After about 15 minutes, Qin Feng took the initiative to stop his movement. Seeing this, Xiao Chen did not continue to attack, although he felt that it was not enough. Qin Feng's long sword was sheathed. His face was calm as he looked at Xiao Chen without the slightest expression. "Your talent is not bad, but your understanding of swordsmanship is not enough." This was the first time that someone said that his understanding of swordsmanship was not enough. However, Xiao Chen did not refute this. He knew that Qin Feng was telling the truth. This was because Xiao Chen had sensed from the very beginning that Qin Feng had already gone easy on him during the fight. Otherwise, he would not have been able to hold on for so long. Moreover, rather than saying that they were exchanging pointers, it was better to say that Qin Feng was giving him pointers. After all, with Xiao Chen's current strength, he was far from qualified to exchange pointers with Qin Feng. Regardless of whether it was the understanding of swordsmanship or the cultivation realm, there was a big gap between Xiao Chen and Qin Feng. Hearing Qin Feng's words, Xiao Chen cupped his hands and bowed. "Thank you, senior." Although Qin Feng looked about the same age as him, Xiao Chen still respectfully addressed him as senior. Regarding this, Qin Feng did not say anything. He turned around, looked at the lake in the distance, and said faintly, "The monk said that you came from a universe called the Great Thousand World?" "Yes." Hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded and replied, "The Great Thousand World, how is it? It can't be compared to the primordial world and the Great World." Qin Feng was also curious about the Great Thousand World. Therefore, he asked. Xiao Chen also answered truthfully. Compared to the primordial world and the Great World, the Great Thousand World was indeed not comparable. It was the result of being completely crushed in all aspects. Hearing Xiao Chen's answer, Qin Feng's expression did not change much. After a moment of silence, he said faintly, "Do you know how many realms there are?" The realms of swordsmanship? Xiao Chen had never heard of this before. Seeing this, Qin Feng did not wait for Xiao Chen to reply. He let out a breath of turbid air and continued. At the initial stage of swordsmanship, comprehending the way of swordsmanship, becoming one with the sword, having the sword in the heart, no sword in the heart, and the way of swordsmanship is divine. Qin Feng said slowly. Hearing Qin Feng's words, Xiao Chen frowned slightly. Xiao Chen had indeed never come into contact with the realms of swordsmanship. However, after hearing Qin Feng's words, Xiao Chen had a slight understanding. At the initial stage of swordsmanship, comprehending the way of swordsmanship, becoming one with the sword, having the sword in the heart, Xiao Chen could understand what these meant. However, there was no sword in the heart, and the way of swordsmanship is divine. Xiao Chen did not know what it meant. Seeing that Xiao Chen was frowning and deep in thought, Qin Feng continued. Your current realm should be having the sword in the heart, but you have not reached the state of having no sword in the heart. Senior, please enlighten me. Hearing this, Xiao Chen cupped his hands and bowed. He did not feel that it was a shameful thing to ask Qin Feng for advice. After all, Qin Feng was stronger than him. Moreover, Xiao Chen did not have a sword in the heart. If a sword cultivator did not have a sword in the heart, then what was he cultivating? Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Qin Feng threw the sword in his hand to the side and said slowly, having no sword in the heart is not giving up, but having no self. Only by having no self can one reach the peak and comprehend the true essence of swordsmanship. Following Qin Feng's words, Xiao Chen could clearly feel that there was no longer any sword aura around Qin Feng's body. It was as if he was not a sword cultivator at all. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the originally calm surface of the lake seemed to have been cut by a sword. The entire lake was instantly split into two. Seeing this scene, Xiao Chen was stunned. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 2439. The surface of the lake wasn't very big, yet it had been directly split into two. The sword aura didn't give off a sharp feeling, but it was precisely because of this that it made people shudder even more. A heavy sword without a sharp edge. It was not that Qin Feng's sword qi did not have a sharp edge, but it gave off a feeling that it had been washed clean. Its sharpness was restrained and its power was even stronger. Time slowly passed and the lake returned to its calm state. At this time, Qin Feng looked at Xiao Chen and said without a change in his expression, "As I said before, your talent is not bad, but perhaps because of the problem of the cultivation environment, you have reached a bottleneck. If you do not have a great opportunity, it will be difficult for you to break through. Let me give you a suggestion. Stay in the Cloud Palace and the Hongmeng world. It will not be too long, at most 3 years. You will not regret the result." After saying this, Qin Feng did not wait for Xiao Chen to reply and immediately left. Qin Feng did not lie about Xiao Chen's talent. This trip to let Xiao Chen temporarily stay in the Cloud Palace and the Hongmeng world was Qin Feng's sincere suggestion. In Qin Feng's eyes, it was not difficult to see that Xiao Chen was a piece of unpolished jade. In terms of talent, Xiao Chen was above Qin Feng. But why was Xiao Chen's cultivation still only at the half-step Emperor realm? To put it bluntly, it was because of the cultivation environment. Thinking about it, the strongest in the Great Thousand World were only the 2 half-step Ancestor Realm Masters, Jun Wuya and Xie Tian. To be honest, Jun Wuya and Xie Tian's half-step Ancestor Realm Masters had more to do with luck. This was because the Great Thousand World did not have any records of those above the Emperor realm. Throughout history, the strongest in the Great Thousand World had always been at the Emperor realm. In this way, to a certain extent, the Great Thousand World had limited Xiao Chen's progress. Now, Xiao Chen felt as if he had reached the peak of the Great Thousand World and there was an insurmountable mountain in front of him. If he wanted to climb this mountain, Shao Chen would have to pay a great price. One had to fumble about on their own, try things out on their own. This way, it was hard to avoid taking many detours. However, in the primordial world, Cloud Palace, and Immortal Palace, there was no such problem at all. This was because regardless of whether it was the Cloud Palace or the Immortal Palace, they both had perfect cultivation systems. Compared to the Great Thousand World, if Shao Chen stayed in the Cloud Palace, he would definitely obtain more. Furthermore, the speed of his improvement would obviously be faster. Of course, Qin Feng said this only because he thought that Shao Chen was a good person. He didn't want a bright pearl to be covered in dust. As for the final decision, it still depended on what the palace lord thought. If the palace lord of the Cloud Palace wasn't willing, then Shao Chen obviously couldn't do anything. However, Qin Feng's words before he left had planted a seed in Shao Chen's heart. In the beginning, the reason why he was in a hurry to return to the Great Thousand World was because he was afraid of the situation there. After all, the battle between the good and evil was not over yet. However, on the other hand, with his current cultivation, what could he do even if he returned to the Great Thousand World? He still couldn't control the development of the Great Thousand World, but what if Shao Chen broke through to the Ancestor Realm? If he returned to the Great Thousand World with his Ancestor Realm cultivation, he would be an invincible existence in the entire Great Thousand World. However, it was especially easy to step into the Ancestor Realm. Jun Wuya and Xie Tian had been stuck at the half-step Ancestor Realm for so many years, but they still hadn't really stepped into the Ancestor Realm. On one hand, he was worried about the situation in the Great Thousand World, worried about his parents, Qin Shuru 100-Flower Fairy, and the children, but on the other hand, Shao Chen had to admit that Qin Feng's words had moved him. With complicated feelings, Shao Chen returned to his residence. When Shao Chen returned, Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing, who had finished their cultivation, were already waiting for him. In the courtyard, seeing Shao Chen walking over with a pensive expression, Long Qing couldn't help but ask, "Little brother, what's wrong with you? You look like you have something on your mind?" "Big brother, second sister, do you think that we've made the right choice to return to the Great Thousand World in a hurry?" Shao Chen asked softly. He told the two of them about his encounter with Qin Feng. After hearing Shao Chen's words, Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing obviously knew what Shao Chen was thinking. The three of them sat together, and Xianyuan Ling said after a long silence, "Third brother, are you worried about the current situation in the Great Thousand World?" "Yes. Actually, I think you're thinking too much, third brother. We've launched a surprise attack on the Evil God Palace, and now Leaping Tiger City has been successfully captured by the sovereigns. With Leaping Tiger City and Mausoleum City in our hands, our Great Thousand World has taken the initiative in the entire war. Although I don't dare to say that we can destroy the Evil God Palace, at least we can protect ourselves. As long as we can take control of Leaping Tiger City and Mausoleum City, the Evil God Palace can only hole up in the Hetian Prefecture," Xianyuan Ling said indifferently. Hearing this, Shao Chen fell into deep thought. Indeed, Xianyuan Ling's words were not without reason. With Leaping Tiger City and Mausoleum City in their hands, the Great Thousand World had taken the initiative in the war. At least, there was no problem in maintaining a stalemate. Moreover, if they did not take down Leaping Tiger City and Mausoleum City, the Evil God Palace would not be able to rush out of the Hetian Prefecture, nor would they be able to pose a threat to the rest of the Great Thousand World. Seeing that Shao Chen had fallen into deep thought, Xianyuan Ling paused for a moment, then continued, "So third brother's worries are unnecessary. On the contrary, I think that Qin Feng is right. After all, this is a great opportunity for us. If we can improve our strength, when we return to the Great Thousand World, we can make the final decision and completely end the war between the good and evil." From what Xianyuan Ling said, he agreed with Qin Feng's suggestion. Hearing this, Xiao Chen did not answer, but he also did not object. It was a silent night. Throughout the night, Xiao Chen had been thinking about this matter. Should he return to the Great Thousand World immediately or stay in the Cloud Palace? After a night, Xiao Chen finally made a decision. When the next morning came, the monk really came. He strode into the courtyard, and when he saw Xiao Chen, he immediately laughed loudly. "Ha, brother Xiao Chen, the matter has been settled. The palace master wants to see you now." The monk's words clearly meant that the palace master of the Cloud Palace had agreed to his request to help him return to the Great Thousand World. Hearing this, Xiao Chen also got up and bowed to the monk. "Thank you, master, but I still have something to discuss with you." Then, Xiao Chen truthfully told the monk about his encounter with Qin Feng by the lake last night, as well as what Qin Feng said to him. In the end, Xiao Chen said with a serious expression, "Although I know that saying this is a bit too whimsical, after all, I am not a disciple of the Cloud Palace, but if possible, I still hope to stay in the Cloud Palace to cultivate and improve my strength." In front of the monk, Xiao Chen did not have any hypocrisy. After all, in front of an ancestor like the monk, those boring twists and turns were obviously meaningless. It was better to directly say what was in his heart. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.